Chapter 25. The middle-aged man paused and said slowly, "Little Xia, I know that your mother is seriously ill and you need money urgently. But the company has its rules and regulations and you can't change them at will. How about this, I'll go and send him away." After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he directly opened the door and walked towards Yi Xian. Xia Chu wiped her tears and could only silently follow behind him. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was calm. However, he'd seen everything that had happened in the office. "Hello, Mr. Yi. I'm really sorry. The house you chose has been sold. Our staff didn't understand the situation and wasted your precious time. I'm very sorry." The middle-aged man came in front of Yi Xian and said with a professional smile. Slap! All of a sudden, with a gust of wind, a huge slap landed on the middle-aged man's face, sending him flying a few meters away. Several bloody teeth flew out, and with a dull thud, the middle-aged man's face swelled up as he crashed to the ground. "I'm a country bumpkin. I'm Mr. Tree." Yi Xian stood up from the sofa with a calm expression. He slowly walked in front of the middle-aged man and stomped on his face with his wide feet. His feet were even more forceful. Dead silence. Everyone was stunned. Not only was the entire sales hall silent, but Xia Chu and the other sales ladies were also stunned. It was as if their souls had left their bodies. "Security, security, he's hitting me. He's hitting me." The middle-aged man screamed like a pig being slaughtered. The security guards in front of the door quickly woke up and ran towards Yi Xian. "Get lost!" A simple word caused the two security guards to stop in their tracks. It was only because Yi Xian's aura was extremely shocking that the two of them didn't dare to act rashly. It was as if a voice was telling the two security guards that if they dared to step forward, their fates would be tragic. Mr. Yi, please don't do this." When the atmosphere was in a deadlock, Xia Chu walked quickly to Yi Xian and begged with a choked voice. "Go and call your real boss here. I must buy this villa today." Yi Xian narrowed his eyes slightly and his voice was slightly gloomy. The middle-aged manager wanted to get up, but before he could, Yi Xian's voice was heard again. "Kneel down. Who allowed you to get up without my permission? Kid, you're fucking looking for death. Do you know whose company this is?" The middle-aged man struggled to get up and yelled at Yi Xian. But before he could finish, what happened next would be unforgettable for the middle-aged manager. Crack! Ah! Yi Xian raised his foot and stomped on the other party's knees. The sound of bones breaking was exceptionally ear-piercing. It made the middle-aged manager kneel on the spot. His miserable howl made one's scalp tingle. He turned around. Yi Xian sat on the sofa again. His expression was calm as if he had done something very casual. However, in the eyes of others, Yi Xian's methods were extremely vicious. Call the boss. Tell him that someone is causing trouble at Bian Pavilion." The middle-aged manager yelled loudly. A sales lady's face turned pale and she quickly picked up the phone to make a call. The entire sales hall was extremely silent. Other than the middle-aged manager who was kneeling on the ground and groaning from time to time, the rest of the people looked at Yi Xian with obvious fear. In fact, Yi Xian didn't want to cause trouble. Since the villa he had his eyes on wasn't for sale, he planned to look elsewhere. However, the middle-aged manager was too presumptuous and didn't take Yi Xian seriously at all. Moreover, Xia Chu was respectful and spoke up for him from beginning to end, but she was scolded by the middle-aged manager. If Yi Xian didn't do anything, it wouldn't be like him. Time passed little by little. When the door of the sales hall was pushed open, several bodyguards in black cleared the way. A graceful figure entered the sales hall. When she saw the middle-aged manager kneeling on the ground, her delicate face immediately turned cold. "What's the matter?" Zhuo Junting said coldly. Zhuo Junting's appearance immediately made the middle-aged manager happy. Then, he said with an aggrieved face, "Miss Zhuo, someone is causing trouble at Bian Pavilion. You have to help me. After the middle-aged manager said this, 2 crocodile tears flowed down his face. Coupled with his swollen face, he indeed gave off an extremely miserable feeling. It's her. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was sitting on the sofa, had a playful look in his eyes. He didn't expect that the owner of Bian Pavilion was the woman who bought his jade talisman. This made Yi Xian feel that the world was really small. Zhuo Junting was in a very bad mood. Not only was she in a bad mood, she was in an extremely bad mood. During this period of time, she had been constantly looking for Yi Xian's whereabouts, but she didn't find any clues. Today, someone was causing trouble at her company, which made her even more irritated. Miss Zhuo, it's this person. He's the one who hurt me. Looking at Zhuo Junting's cold expression, the middle-aged manager quickly pointed at Yi Xian and said, "Sir, you hurt our company's employees for no reason. Don't you think you've gone too far? Or, Zhuo Junting was about to angrily rebuke Yi Xian, but before she could finish her words, she saw Yi Xian's appearance and was stunned on the spot. Her angry words also stopped abruptly at this moment. My jade talisman is still working, right? Yi Xian said calmly. It's you. Zhuo Junting exclaimed. There was no trace of anger on her face. Instead, she walked excitedly towards Yi Xian. Such a scene directly stunned the middle-aged manager. He didn't recover for a long time. As long as he wasn't a fool, he could tell that his boss obviously knew this person. Seeing her extremely excited expression, the middle-aged manager also had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Master! Master, I've finally found you. When she arrived in front of Yi Xian, Zhuo Junting was so excited that she couldn't speak. Her hands were at a loss and she was clearly nervous. Why are you looking for me? That jade talisman is enough to solve your family's problem. Moreover, I'm not a master. You can call me Yi Xian. Yi Xian said calmly. Then I'll call you Mr. Yi. My grandfather has always wanted to thank you in person for saving his life. I wonder if you have time to visit my Zhuo family? Zhuo Junting asked with anticipation in her eyes. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't reply to Zhuo Junting's invitation. This also made Zhuo Junting quickly come to her senses. She suddenly looked at the middle-aged manager kneeling on the ground. Manager Su, what's going on? Zhuo Junting's expression changed and she angrily rebuked the middle-aged manager. Looking at such a scene, how could the middle-aged manager not see the situation in front of him? This also made him dare not hide the slightest bit of the situation from before. After Zhuo Junting knew the whole story, her face suddenly turned cold. She said, "Who gave you the right to make a decision and reserve the house for that guy, Qi Shichen?" Chapter 26. Zhuo Junting's constant reprimanding of the middle-aged manager made him even more terrified. He could already tell that Yi Xian held a very important position in Zhuo Junting's heart, which made him even more apologetic. He even continuously pleaded with Yi Xian, "Mr. Yi, please don't hold grudges against me. If I had known that you and Miss Xiao were friends, even if you gave me 10 guts, I wouldn't have dared to gossip behind your back." The middle-aged manager's face was covered in tears and snot, looking extremely pitiful. He was no longer as arrogant as he was in the office, but he couldn't understand how Yi Xian could hear what he said in the office. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was unmoved by the middle-aged manager's crying and pleading. Such a two-faced person couldn't arouse his interest. What happened next was simple. Zhuo Junting used a thunderous method to fire the middle-aged manager as he begged. In fact, it was just a small matter to Zhuo Junting. If it was someone else, she wouldn't have fired him. But since it involved Yi Xian, she naturally sentenced the middle-aged manager to death. After settling the matter, Zhuo Junting quickly walked to Yi Xian and smiled, "So Mr. Yi wants to buy a house. This house is Junting's gift to you. It's a small token of appreciation from our Zhuo family." Yi Xian got up from the sofa and looked at Zhuo Junting's smiling face. He slowly shook his head and said, "I don't deserve it. This house costs a total of 35 million. If you don't accept it, I can only look elsewhere. Although Zhuo Junting wanted to give the house to Yi Xian, she could tell that the master in front of her didn't want to owe her a favor. This made her slightly helpless and agree. Although the villa she gave to Yi Xian wasn't accepted, Zhuo Junting had other thoughts in her heart. As long as Yi Xian stayed in the Biyun Pavilion, there would naturally be time to interact with him in the future. If she was too eager to show goodwill now, she was afraid that it would backfire. Miss Xia, thank you for your help earlier. Can you show me the house now? Xia Chu was still in a daze. Only when Yi Xian's voice rang out did she return to her senses. She looked at Yi Xian with an extremely complicated expression. As the boss of Biyun Pavilion, how could Zhuo Junting not recognize her employees? When she saw the smile on Yi Xian's face, she instantly understood that this expert had a good impression of Xia Chu. Well, you take Mr. Yi to see the house first. When you come back, go to the personnel department. From today on, you will take over Manager Su's work. Table Junting said with a smile. Ah! Xia Chu was stunned for a moment before she quickly reacted. She bowed to the table and thank you, Miss Table. Work hard in the future. You take Mr. Yi to see the house first, then you are fully responsible for signing the contract. Zhuo Junting said. What happened one after another made everyone in the sales office feel like they were in a dream. However, when Xia Chu and Yi Xian left, everyone looked at Xia Chu with envy. Some people secretly regretted it. If they had known this would happen, they would have personally received Yi Xian. How could Xia Chu, this silly girl, have a turn? At this moment, watching Yi Xian and Xia Chu walk out of the sales office, Table Junting clenched her fists. Her eyes were filled with uncontrollable joy. She even took out her phone and called home. Grandpa, I have found that expert. Yes. Good. What? You want to visit him in person? Okay, Grandpa, I know. After a full 10 minutes, Table Junting hung up the phone. She had never thought that her grandpa would value Yi Xian so much that he would visit him in person. Grandfather Zhuo had a pivotal position in the entire Jiangnan city. When he was young, he was a legendary figure. Not only in Jiangnan, but even in the capital, he had many old friends. His connections could be said to be spread across half of the state of Great Xia. There were only a few people in the state of Great Xia who could make Grandfather Zhuo come in person. How could this not shock Table Junting? Biyun Pavilion Villa Group. As the door of the villa opened, Yi Xian, accompanied by Xia Chu, strolled into the villa. It was winter now. Green vegetation could not be seen on both sides of the road, but under the white snow, there was a different kind of beauty. Along the way, Xia Chu was very uneasy. Except for Yi Xian asking about the situation of the villa, she did not say anything. It was as if she had something on her mind. Villa number 9, Yi Xian's new home. As the two entered the villa, Yi Xian found that the interior decoration was luxurious and elegant. All kinds of furniture and appliances were complete, which made him very satisfied. He did not have to buy these things himself. As for Xia Chu, who was standing behind him, her eyes were extremely complicated. There was hesitation, struggle, and a trace of shyness. Yi Xian's divine sense was very sensitive. He immediately noticed that the woman behind him was whistling anxiously. This made him turn around and look at Xia Chu. With a puzzled expression, he asked, Miss Xia, are you not feeling well? Mr. Yi. Thank you for earlier. Xia Chu blushed and said with a trembling voice. It's just a small matter. You don't have to thank me. Yi Xian did not mind. He only thought that Xia Chu had not recovered from the incident just now. He then continued to look at the layout of the villa. Today's experience made Xia Chu feel like she was in a dream. However, she also understood that the reason she was promoted to manager of Biyun Pavilion was all because of the man in front of her. And with such a big performance, just the commission alone was as high as millions. As a sales lady, Xia Chuchu knew from other sales ladies that if a male customer bought a house in their hands, they might have to pay a price. And this price was naturally something that both men and women knew. And Yi Xian was accompanied by her from beginning to end. This was also the reason why she felt uneasy. Just as Xia Chuchu was letting her imagination run wild, Yi Xian also finished looking at the layout of the villa. He directly came in front of Xia Chuchu and said, I'm very satisfied with this place. Let's sign the contract now. Ha! Oh, okay. The two of them were very close to each other. This also made Xia Chuchu blush. She took a step back and quickly took out the purchase contract. As Yi Xian signed his name and directly transferred the money online, the house officially belonged to Yi Xian. Even after the contract was signed, Yi Xian did not make any unreasonable requests. This made Xia Chuchu feel ashamed. It seemed that she had thought too much. While Xia Chuchu was rejoicing that Yi Xian was a good person, she also felt a little disappointed. This feeling made her a little stunned, and a blush appeared on her face. She secretly scolded herself for being a little shameless. Soon, the villa's key was handed over to Yi Xian. He also officially became the owner of this house. Xia Chuchu also bid farewell and left. However, her blushing cheeks were very well seen by Yi Xian. Looking at Xia Chuchu's beautiful figure running away, Yi Xian, as an immortal cultivator, was very sensitive to the mind. He could roughly guess the other party's thoughts. This also made him sigh helplessly. Yi Xian asked himself. He was not a gentleman and was not immune to so-called female charms. It was just that his 4 years of bloody experience had made his heart as firm as a rock. Naturally, he did not think in that direction. Chapter 27. They were moving house and moving in. When Yi Xian brought his mother and sister into their new home, Yi Ling cheered incessantly and kept looking around the villa. She even kept asking Yi Xian where he got the money to buy such a large villa. Although Mrs. Yi was surprised, she knew that her son was not an ordinary person, so she did not ask too much. Seeing the happy faces of his mother and sister, Yi Xian was also very satisfied. In the evening, Mrs. Yi even personally cooked a sumptuous dinner, and the atmosphere at home was very warm. After so many days, the medicinal effects of the spirit yun pill had also begun to take effect. Mrs. Ye's pale hair gradually turned black, and her wrinkled skin became delicate and smooth. Everything was developing in a good direction, which also made Yi Xian very happy. At the dining table, Yi Ling was like a lark, constantly talking about the interesting things that happened in school while Mrs. Yi would occasionally pick up some food for her children. Although there was a smile on her face, there was a tinge of worry between her brows, as if she had something on her mind. Mother, you miss brother, don't you? As her son, how could Yi Xian not tell what was on Mrs. Ye's mind? As Yi Xian's voice sounded, the smile on Yi Ling's face also disappeared, and the atmosphere at home suddenly became a little gloomy. Mrs. Yi shook her head and said with a bitter smile, Ping has been brought back to the Yi family, he should be living a good life now. Come, let's eat. The sound of bowls and chopsticks colliding sounded again, but it was no longer as warm as before. Even the lively Yi Ling was eating with a complicated gaze in her eyes. Looking at the heavy atmosphere at home, Yi Xian sighed in his heart. After all, there was one less person. Mother, I'm done eating, I'm going out for a walk, Yi Xian said softly, put down the bowl and chopsticks, and stepped out of the house. The moon was bright and the stars were few, and the sky was dark. Yi Xian walked on the winding path with an expressionless face. It would be the new year in a month, and as the end of the year approached, Mrs. Yi began to miss him more and more. That also made Yi Xian know that it was time for him to go to capital city. The capital. Yi Xian muttered to himself. He looked at the distant horizon. When his eyes opened and closed, the light in his eyes was deep. No one knew what Yi Xian was thinking. Capital. It was a distant word. There was his biological father, his younger brother, his so-called lover, and many people who looked down on him. Wang. When Yi Xian appeared again, he was already high in the sky. He sat cross-legged among the clouds, overlooking Jiangnan City below him. The aura around him was extremely obscure. That night, Yi Xian didn't return home. Only when the sun rose from the east and the first ray of sunlight shone on his body did he slowly open his eyes. Who? A stream of turbid air was spat out, causing an explosion to resound in the clear sky. The aura around Yi Xian's body became tranquil. When he took a step forward, he had already appeared in his home. Jiangnan's hanging mirror department. Tai Li and Ling Long bowed at the side, looking slightly embarrassed. A handsome man was sitting on the sofa with a lazy look on his face, as if he had not woken up yet. Such a young ancient martial arts grandmaster is indeed rare. Help me make an appointment with him. Tell him that I want to talk to him. Azure Dragon yawned and casually ordered Tai Li and Ling Long. Master Azure Dragon, do you really want to recruit him into the Wu En department? Ling Long asked with a pale face. If he is really an ancient martial arts grandmaster, of course we will recruit him into the Wu En department. If he is not, and he injured my people. Azure Dragon said lazily. He did not continue speaking, but the aura around him suddenly became cold. Time passed quickly. Yi Xian was very idle these days. He tasted tea at home every day and read some ancient books. Other than Zhua Junting, who occasionally came to greet him, nothing else happened. In fact, Yi Xian was already prepared to go to Capital City, but he was waiting for the Wu En department to come looking for him. After all, he had severely injured the Wu En department's people. However, they did not make a move after such a long time. Clearly, this was not normal. Yi Xian could only leave Jiangnan City with peace of mind after he had taken care of everything. On this day, a letter was placed in front of Yi Xian. When he finished reading the letter, a smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. They came pretty quickly. Yi Xian chuckled and the letter in his hand turned into ashes. Full Moon Pavilion. When Yi Xian stepped into the place, Tai Li and Ling Long quickly went up to him. Mr. Yi, Master Azure Dragon is waiting for you in the Heavenly Cloud Hall. Tai Li gestured for him to enter. There was no change in his expression. Heavenly Cloud Hall. As Tai Li opened the door, Yi Xian strolled into the room. Tai Li closed the door and waited outside silently. Only Yi Xian and the young man in front of him were left in the Heavenly Cloud Hall. Yi Xian. An ancient martial arts master? Azure Dragon smiled and stood up. He kept looking at Yi Xian from head to toe. It seems that you're the person in charge of the Wu En department? Yi Xian said calmly. Tai Li and Ling Long waited anxiously for a full hour. However, there was no movement from the Heavenly Cloud Hall. The two of them did not know what had happened. Creak. The door of the Heavenly Cloud Hall was pushed open. Yi Xian walked out calmly. He glanced at Tai Li and Ling Long indifferently, then walked out of the Full Moon Pavilion without looking back. Both of you, come in. Just as Tai Li and Ling Long were stunned, Azure Dragon's weak voice came from the Heavenly Cloud Hall. The two of them quickly walked in. Team Leader Azure Dragon. You are. Tai Li cried out in shock because he saw an extremely shocking scene. In the Heavenly Cloud Hall, Azure Dragon's face was pale. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. His body emitted an extremely weak aura. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. Pass me the Azure Dragon token. From today onwards, Yi Xian is the Wu En department's Earth Team guest elder. No matter what request he has, you must try your best to satisfy him. Azure Dragon supported himself on the table and stood up. Although his voice was weak, it was resolute and did not allow anyone to question him. However, after he issued this order, Tai Li and the other person were extremely shocked. Their gazes when they looked at Azure Dragon revealed an extremely strange expression. Heaven and earth were mysterious and yellow. The universe was chaotic. There were a total of 8 departments in the Wu En department. Azure Dragon was the leader of the Earth Team. He was an important person in the Wu En department. However, such a person's attitude at this moment made the two of them extremely puzzled. There were only 10 guest elders in the entire Wu-En department. Apart from the Wu-En department who could appoint 2 guest elders, each of the other departments had 1 guest elder position. This position was not a small matter. It was an existence that only followed orders. To put it bluntly, it was a guest elder's personal freedom. He was not controlled by the Wu-En department. However, he had great power. The Earth Team guest elder position had been empty for more than 10 years. Today, Azure Dragon actually gave this position to Yi Xian. How could Tai Li and Ling Long not be shocked? What are you waiting for? Quickly send my order back to the headquarters. Azure Dragon said sternly while Tai Li and Ling Long were stunned. Yes, Lord Azure Dragon. Tai Li and Ling Long quickly came to their senses. They did not dare to ask the reason and immediately left the Heavenly Cloud Hall to pass on Azure Dragon's order. In the Heavenly Cloud Hall. After Tai Li and Ling Long left, Azure Dragon could no longer control his excitement. His body was trembling at this moment and his face was slightly flushed. Xiantian. It's actually the legendary Xiantian martial artist. Moss. Master. Did you see that? There really are Xiantian martial artists in this world. Azure Dragon said to himself with a trembling voice. 2 lines of clear tears flowed down from his eyes. No one knew what Azure Dragon had just experienced, and no one knew why he was so excited. However, when Azure Dragon's order was sent back to the headquarters of the Wu-En department, the entire department was greatly shaken. Chapter 28. Baiyun Pavilion, Villa Number 9. Yi Xian sat on the sofa with a red document in front of him. When he opened the document, a dragon-shaped national emblem appeared in front of him. There was a line of words written on the document. Name, Yi Xian. Rank, Army Colonel. Position, Wu-En Agency Ground Team Guest Officer. Looking at the document in front of him, Yi Xian's expression was calm, but he was surprised. He didn't expect Azure Dragon to give him the rank of Colonel. One had to know that in Xia country, soldiers had an extremely high status. They were existences that protected the country and were respected by the people of Xia country. Azure Dragon gave him this rank because it meant a lot. You want me to serve the country? Yi Xian shook his head helplessly. Yi Xian put away the document. Now that the matter with the Wu-En agency had been resolved, he could directly head to the capital. Dinner time. Yi Xian informed Mother Yi that he would be going out for a while and would be back in a month at most. Of course, Yi Xian didn't tell her that he was going to the capital. This was also because he was afraid that Mother Yi would be worried. A Boeing 747 plane took off from Jiangnan Airport and headed in the direction of Xia country's capital. In the first-class cabin, Yi Xian closed his eyes to rest, giving off a quiet and tranquil feeling. According to Yi Xian's original plan, he could directly head to the capital. This was much faster than taking a plane. However, Yi Xian thought about it and decided against it. Firstly, this move was a little shocking. Secondly, with the advancement of technology, if his existence was detected, there would definitely be unnecessary trouble. And when he was buying the plane ticket, a small incident happened. Yi Xian awkwardly realized that if he wanted to buy a plane ticket, he needed an ID card. And after disappearing for 4 years, his ID card had long been cancelled. He was now an unregistered citizen. Suddenly, Yi Xian thought of the document in his hand and tried to use it to buy a plane ticket. What happened next made Yi Xian realize how powerful the document in his hand was. Although the ticket seller had never seen Yi Xian's ID before, the words "Colonel" were clearly written on it. She didn't dare to be negligent and immediately reported the matter to her superior. When the airport director confirmed that the documents were authentic, he became nervous. He even saluted Yi Xian and greeted him, "Greetings, Chief." Not only did he personally handle the boarding procedures for Yi Xian, he even arranged for Yi Xian to sit in the first-class cabin. Thinking of this episode, Yi Xian couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that the certificate given to him by the Azure Dragon really did have a lot of power. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" Just as Yi Xian was closing his eyes to rest, the air stewardess' gentle voice rang in his ears. "Thank you, but there's no need." Yi Xian declined politely without opening his eyes. "If you have any instructions, please feel free to summon me. I will be at your service on this flight." The stewardess followed her etiquette and left Yi Xian's side. At this moment, in the first-class cabin, there were 4 seats. Other than Yi Xian's seat, there were 2 other men and a woman. When the 3 of them saw this scene, they also looked at Yi Xian with a strange gaze. One had to know that the flight they were on was China Airlines. To be able to let the air stewardess serve one person, it was obvious that Yi Xian's background was not ordinary. He definitely held an important position in China. "Your humble servant is Zhang Yi, the chairman of the livestock group. May I know where this gentleman works?" A bald, middle-aged man smiled and said. Clearly, he wanted to get to know Yi Xian. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't respond to this person's greeting. This made the bald, middle-aged man look embarrassed. He snorted and didn't ask for a snub. When the other 2 saw this scene, they naturally wouldn't repeat the same mistake. This also caused the first-class cabin to quiet down. The plane shuttled through the clouds and would arrive at the capital airport in 3 hours. Yi Xian, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes at this moment. There was a hint of gloominess in his eyes. "Yi. Mr. Yi. The plane is in an emergency. Please take shelter in the cockpit." The first-class cabin door was opened. The air stewardess's face was pale. She immediately locked the door and walked quickly to Yi Xian. "What's going on?" Yi Xian didn't say anything, but the bald man was already panicking. Everyone who took the plane knew that if the plane broke down, it wouldn't be a small matter. Although the air stewardess tried her best not to show any signs of fear, the people present were all experienced people. How could they not see the panic in the air stewardess's eyes? Unfortunately, the air stewardess didn't answer the bald man's question. Instead, she pulled Yi Xian's arm and said anxiously, "Mr. Yi, quickly follow me into the cockpit." Yi Xian was as steady as a mountain. His voice was calm as he said, "Since they want to hijack the plane, they are naturally prepared. Even if we enter the cockpit, we won't be able to stop them." "What? Hijack? Are you kidding?" When Yi Xian's voice fell, the other 3 exclaimed. The air stewardess was stunned. She couldn't understand how Yi Xian found out about this. Bang, bang, bang. Just as everyone was shocked, they heard a series of loud noises coming from outside the cabin door. It was obvious that someone outside was hitting the cabin door, trying to enter the first-class cabin. Bang! With a loud sound, the cabin door was knocked open. 2 foreign men with ivory pistols in their hands were looking at Yi Xian and the others with a sinister smile. This, looking at the scene in front of him, the bald man cried out in alarm. His entire body went limp in his seat, and great fear appeared in his eyes. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen." A foreign man spoke in fluent Xia language. He walked into the first-class cabin with an ivory pistol in his hand. His eyes were flashing with madness. "No. Don't kill me. I have money. I have a lot of money," the bald man said with a trembling voice. "Oh, damn God, this guy is too noisy. Your devout believer will send him to see you." The foreign man shrugged, raised the ivory pistol and pulled the trigger. Bang! Flames spurted out and bullets flew out. The bald man was shot dead on the spot. A large amount of blood flowed out from between his eyebrows, and the entire first-class cabin fell into a panic. Such a terrifying scene made the air stewardess collapse to the ground. The other 2 first-class passengers covered their mouths tightly, not daring to make any noise. They all looked at the foreign man with fear. "Oh, damn God, Jack, you're killing people again." Another foreign man entered the first-class cabin, holding his forehead and complaining. No, Muriel, You don't know how to appreciate art. Don't you know that killing people is a very great thing? When the bullet pierces the other person's head, the explosion of blood in an instant is the last brilliance of life. That kind of beautiful feeling is something that a rough person like you won't understand. Jack looked intoxicated. He breathed in the smell of blood in the air as if he really enjoyed it. Chapter 29. Alright, you bastard abandoned by God. Take these people to the economy class. The boss is waiting for us, Mirel growled. Go, 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 all of you pigs from the Xia, get up. This is a carnival, and it will also begin your pleasant journey. Jack's face was ferocious as he forced Yi Xian and the others to walk towards the economy class. At this moment, Yi Xian's face was gloomy. He had never thought that he would encounter such a situation when he was just heading to the capital. It seemed that wherever he went, people would cause trouble. Hey, kid from the Xia, if you don't want your head to be shot into a sieve, listen to me obediently. Jack said gloomily as he looked at Yi Xian, who did not move. The wind was calm and the clouds were untainted by dust. Yi Xian got up from his seat and walked towards Jack. His face was extremely calm, but when he opened and closed his eyes, his ruthless gaze was extremely frightening. Seeing Yi Xian walking towards him without the slightest fear, Jack was suddenly stunned. A fierce look appeared on his face as he said, "Kid, stop right there. If you take another step forward, Lao Tzu will kill you." "Mr. Yi, what are you doing?" the stewardess exclaimed. "Even if you want to die, don't drag us down with you." A first-class passenger shouted in horror. Buzz! He took a step forward and shifted his position, causing ripples in the air. When Yi Xian appeared again, he was already standing beside Jack. His jade-like hand was directly choking the other person's neck. Crack! His 5 fingers suddenly tightened, and the sound of his throat breaking could be heard. A large amount of blood flowed from the corner of Jack's mouth. This person's neck was directly broken by Yi Xian, and he died tragically in his hands. Bang! Yi Xian threw the person to the ground as if he was throwing away trash. Jack's body kept twitching on the ground, and a large amount of blood stained the ground red. This scene also caused the entire first-class cabin to become deathly silent. Fuck! Bang, bang, bang! A gunshot rang out and a bullet flew out of the chamber. His comrade died tragically in an instant. This great turn of events made Mirai's expression change drastically. He pulled the trigger and shot wildly at Yi Xian. Afterimages flew and the void froze. Yi Xian did not seem to have made any movements, but as his palm rose and fell, he formed a circle with his palm and drew a beautiful arc in the void. Several breaths later, his face was deathly pale, and his eyes were filled with fear. This was because Yi Xian, who was standing in front of him, was unharmed. What made him feel even more hopeless was that the bullets he fired from his gun were slowly falling from Yi Xian's hand. Ancient martial artist. You are an ancient martial artist from China? Muriel murmured in a trembling voice. His footsteps slowly retreated, and then he suddenly fled toward the economy class. You want to leave? Do you think you can leave? Yi Xian sneered. Wang! He stretched out his palm and fingers, and a suction force appeared. Before the man could escape a few steps, his body flew backward and was caught by Yi Xian's palm and fingers on the top of his head. Tell me, why did you hijack the plane? Yi Xian said in a flat voice. Kill me if you want, but don't expect to get a single word out of me. Mirai's face was full of fear, but he still roared loudly, and his eyes were filled with madness. Ugh! Looking at Mirai's unyielding expression, Yi Xian smiled and said, I admire people like you who are not afraid of death. In that case, I will fulfill your wish. Bang! As Yi Xian said this, a terrifying force erupted from his palm. Mirai's body went limp, and he fell to the ground with blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. He died tragically in Yi Xian's hands. Looking at the body that was gradually turning cold at his feet, Yi Xian laughed mockingly and muttered to himself, What a foolish mortal. Isn't it good to be alive? Everything was silent, and there was no sound. When the two foreign murderers died at the hands of Yi Xian, the three passengers and the stewardess in the first-class cabin seemed to have lost their souls. They did not recover for a long time. Mr. Yi. You. Yi Xian's methods were completely beyond the stewardess' knowledge. She wanted to say something with a trembling voice, but she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Terrifying, cruel, and bloody. This was the impression that Yi Xian gave to the stewardess. If the two foreign men were just killing for fun, in the stewardess' eyes, Yi Xian killed the two men as if he had stepped on two ants. His face did not change at all, and it did not cause any emotional fluctuations. When a person could kill people without a change in expression, as if they were eating and drinking, this kind of person was undoubtedly the most terrifying. And Yi Xian was this kind of person. You all stay here. I will go to the economy cabin to take a look. Yi Xian said softly. He did not care about what the stewardess and the others thought. He stepped directly through the cabin door and walked toward the economy cabin. Yi Xian was not interested in why these murderers wanted to hijack the plane. He only knew that he was taking this plane to the capital. If they really succeeded in hijacking the plane, wouldn't it delay his journey? In the economy cabin. When Yi Xian stepped in, his eyes focused and his face instantly turned cold. The smell of blood filled the entire economy cabin. The bodies of more than 10 passengers were very conspicuous. The remaining passengers who were lucky enough to survive covered their heads with their hands and squatted on the ground, trembling. 5 foreign men were holding guns and the leader was wearing a ghost mask. His sinister eyes looked directly at Yi Xian through the mask, and there was a flash of madness in his eyes. This kind of scene might have frightened ordinary people out of their wits, but for Yi Xian, it did not cause any fluctuations in his heart. What really made his expression change was that there were several plastic bombs placed all over the economy cabin. The red second hand was slowly ticking, as if it wanted to reap everyone's lives. Beep, beep, beep. The sound of the countdown timer was not loud, but as time passed, when the needle reached the end, it was likely that the plane would be destroyed and people would die. God bless us. I never expected to meet an ancient warrior from China here. Unfortunately, even if you are an ancient warrior, everyone on this plane, including you, will die today. The man wearing the ghost mask was clearly the leader of this group of people. They all had communication devices on them, so they clearly knew that their subordinates had been killed by Yi Xian. Woo! The cabin door suddenly opened, and a cold gust of wind rushed into the cabin, causing the passengers in the economy class to scream. A large number of foreign objects flew and circled in the cabin, causing the entire plane to shake at this moment. The ghost masked man smiled sinisterly and waved his hand at Yi Xian. He jumped out of the plane with a few of his subordinates. The parachute behind him quickly opened and disappeared from Yi Xian's sight. Terrorists. Yi Xian was very sure that this group of people were terrorists. It was likely that this was an organized and premeditated terrorist attack. However, Yi Xian could not understand. China was a powerful country in the world, so who gave them the guts to launch such a terrorist attack? Were these people not afraid of China's thunderous methods? These thoughts flashed through his mind as Yi Xian quickly regained his senses. He knew that he had to resolve the predicament in front of him first. Yi Xian closed the cabin door and the violent airflow disappeared. However, the passengers in the cabin were crying non-stop. Clearly, the plastic bombs placed everywhere made them know that they were doomed. What are you waiting for? Evacuate the passengers and let them all enter first class. Yi Xian coldly reprimanded, causing an air steward to instantly wake up. Although he did not know who Yi Xian was, he still quickly organized the crowd and rushed to first class. Chapter 30. In the cockpit, the two captains had already realized the severity of the situation, but there was nothing they could do. They could only pilot the plane and send out distress signals to the ground. Sir, it's too dangerous here. You should get into first class quickly. The air steward quickly returned after settling the passengers down. He shouted at Yi Xian, but his eyes were filled with despair. Obviously, the air steward understood that no matter if it was first class or economy class, the moment the bomb exploded, the plane would crash. No one on the plane would be spared. Get back. In economy class, Yi Xian's eyes were cold and his expression was ugly. Looking at Yi Xian's motionless body, the air steward sighed helplessly. At this moment, he couldn't care less about Yi Xian. He immediately returned to first class and took out his phone, ready to write his will. Beep, beep, beep. The second hand on the plastic bomb kept ticking. There were 5 minutes left before it exploded. This made Yi Xian frown. He was hesitating whether to save these hundreds of lives. Ring, ring, ring. Suddenly, a phone rang from Yi Xian's pocket, causing him to take out his phone. It seemed that the person who called him was Azure Dragon. This satellite phone was given to him by Azure Dragon so that he could contact him at any time. At this critical moment, Azure Dragon called. Obviously, he already knew what happened on the plane. Mr. Yi, are you on this plane? Azure Dragon's anxious voice came from the other end of the phone. The bomb will explode in 5 minutes. Yi Xian didn't waste any time and directly told him the situation on the plane. On the other end of the phone, Azure Dragon instantly went silent. After a few seconds, Azure Dragon's trembling voice came from the phone. You're a pre-celestial martial artist. I don't know if you know how to defuse a bomb. Defuse a bomb? Yi Xian laughed self-deprecatingly. It was true that he was extremely strong, but when it came to defusing a bomb, Yi Xian knew nothing. Azure Dragon, remember this. The Wuan agency owes me a favor. Yi Xian said calmly and hung up the phone. In the economy class. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. If he forcibly removed the explosives, they would explode in an instant, burning the entire economy class. The plane would also lose its balance and fall to the ground. Yi Xian secretly estimated that this Boeing 747 weighed several hundred tons. With his current cultivation, he would have to pay a great price to safely land the plane. At this moment, the first-class cabin was crowded with people. Everyone's face was covered in tears. Some people were praying to the heavens, while others were writing their wills on their phones. Despair filled every corner. Bang, bang, bang. The plane shook violently, and several explosions could be heard coming from the economy class. The terrifying flames swept through everything, causing the plane to instantly plummet, and everyone felt a sense of weightlessness. I don't want to die. Mom, I'm scared. Honey, let's meet again in the next life. Cries, please, and all sorts of sorrowful cries came from the mouths of these passengers. After a dozen breaths of time, when these passengers suddenly realized that they were not dead, their cries came to an abrupt end. Everyone's eyes were filled with a dazed look. I'm not dead. Look, the plane is landing. When everyone came back to their senses, they realized that although the plane was falling, the speed was extremely stable. This made them shout excitedly, and everyone's eyes were filled with hope. In the plane's cockpit, the two captains' eyes were dull. The dashboard in front of them had already burst into sparks and burned. Obviously, the plane had malfunctioned and was not controlled by them at all. However, when the two captains saw that the plane was landing smoothly through the window, they could not believe it. It was as if they were in a dream. Capital City, Heaven's Eye platform. A very high-tech screen appeared here. Dozens of researchers were pale, and they were constantly controlling the electronic instruments in front of them. Several old men in military uniforms clenched their fists, and they did not dare to blink as they watched the scene on the screen. Reporting to the chief, the plane has exploded and is falling toward the East Sea. Reporting to the chief, the plane's communication system has been cut off. We can't connect. On the screen, a Boeing 747 was emitting black smoke and was falling rapidly to the ground. It was obvious that it would not be long before this plane turned into a wreckage. Bang! Damn it, who dares to commit such a heinous crime in our country? A stocky old man roared, and his fists slammed on the table. The veins on his forehead were visible. Activate the S-level plan. Order the East Sea Fleet to set off immediately and search for all possible survivors. Another old man with white hair and beard roared anxiously, but there was deep despair in his eyes. Everyone knew that when the plane crashed, it was impossible for anyone to survive. Even so, the search and rescue operation must be carried out as soon as possible. No matter who did this, I will make him pay a heavy price. An old man in a general's uniform was extremely pale. Men, inform the Secretary of Wu-En to start an investigation immediately. No matter who the enemy is, they must pay the price in blood. A chief roared angrily. Reporting to the chief, the plane is landing smoothly. Suddenly, a researcher said with a trembling voice, which also stunned the few old men who were in pain. They quickly looked at the screen. On the screen, the fuselage of the Boeing 747 was burning, and a large amount of black smoke was billowing like a tide. However, the falling speed was obviously slowed down until the entire plane became stable and was slowly landing in the East Sea. What's going on? A military big shot said in horror. He could not believe his eyes. Quick, look, what is that? A deputy national big shot pointed at the image on the screen and shouted in disbelief. Zoom in on the satellite image. An order was issued, and the researcher quickly zoomed in on the image on the screen. The sky was clear and blue for thousands of miles. A misty blood-red light was blooming. In the dense blood-red light, a figure was holding the entire plane and was falling to the ground. However, the dense blood-red light covered his body, making it impossible to see his appearance. If they did not zoom in on the satellite image, no one would believe that they would see such a thing. Who is he? No, impossible, is this a person? All kinds of horrified voices came out from the mouths of these big shots. Everyone was already in a daze. Although they knew that there were ancient martial artists and superpowered users in this world, they had never heard of a living person being able to lift a plane that weighed hundreds of tons. They were afraid that this person could no longer be called a person. It was more like a legendary god. Above the East Sea, the sea was blue and there were no waves. A plane with black smoke was bobbing on the surface of the sea. Yi Xian was surrounded by blood light, which made people unable to see his appearance. However, the aura around his body had become somewhat weak at this moment. With his own strength, Yi Xian dragged a plane that weighed hundreds of tons down. Although he was an immortal cultivator, this also consumed a lot of his cultivation. At this moment, a great pain came from his divine sense, which made his face slightly distorted. Buzz! With a step, the void changed. Yi Xian did not stay and directly disappeared above the East Sea. He had already saved the passengers on the plane. As for the rest, naturally, someone would take over. Chapter 31. Capital City, Heaven's Eye Platform. The meeting room was filled with big shots from the military and political circles. Everyone had different expressions on their faces, but they were all looking at the satellite screen with surprise and doubt. My colleagues, the hijacking incident has already happened. The Marshal Security Bureau is investigating this matter. These arrogant people who dare to attack our Xia country, we will definitely teach them a lesson in blood. A Xia country general said in a sonorous and powerful voice. However, the main reason why we have gathered everyone here today is because of this person. The Xia general pointed at the blurry figure on the screen and continued, according to the analysis of the researchers, this blurry figure is indeed a human, and he was the one who landed the plane safely. What? How is this possible? General Li, how can there be such an unbelievable thing in the world? It caused a huge commotion. Everyone in the meeting room was in an uproar. Clearly, they could not believe what they had heard. Looking at the shocked and doubtful expressions of everyone present, General Li frowned. Clearly, he knew that this was a fantasy. If it were not for the repeated assurances of the researchers that the other party was indeed a human, even he himself would not dare to believe it. Generally, if this is true, it means that not only can this person fly, but he can also lift a plane that weighs hundreds of tons. He can be called a human-shaped nuclear bomb. If he wants to do something, who can stop him? A big shot from the political circle said worriedly. That's right. Even though there are secret organizations in every country in the world, and their strength surpasses that of mortals, it is impossible for them to reach this level. All sorts of discussions appeared. This supernatural phenomenon made all the big shots of Xia country worry. My colleagues, first of all, you have to understand one thing. This is indeed an incident that happened, and this person was able to save everyone on the plane. He is obviously a friend and not an enemy. It is very likely that he is a citizen of Xia. Please do not put him on the enemy's side, General Li said solemnly. General Li is right. If this person can work for the country, it will be a great fortune for Xia. The Wuhan agency secretary nodded in agreement. After a series of discussions, the final decision was to mobilize all available forces to search for Yi Xian. The plane crash was listed as an SSS-level military secret, and many big shots in the military and political circles signed a confidentiality agreement at the meeting. Capital City. Yi Xian strolled through the crowded streets. As he looked at the tall buildings all over the place, a fleeting light appeared in his eyes. More than 10 years. I didn't expect to be back here again. Yi Xian laughed at himself. When he was 5 years old, Yi Xian and his mother were driven out of the Yi family. They hurriedly left the capital and finally established themselves in Jiangnan City. Time flew by. He did not expect that he would set foot in this city again after more than 10 years. Yi Xian suppressed his troubled thoughts and strolled towards a 5-star hotel. City in the Sky was the name of this hotel. It was also one of the top hotels in the capital. Those who could afford to dine here were all high-ranking officials and dignitaries. A meal here might cost several years of an ordinary person's salary. When Yi Xian stepped into the hotel, he went straight to the front desk and booked a presidential suite. Under the respectful gaze of the receptionist, Yi Xian took the room card and found his room. Money was just a worldly possession, not to mention that Yi Xian had hundreds of millions of Chinese currency in his hands. Since he had come to the capital, the place he stayed in would naturally be the best. In the presidential suite, Yi Xian sat cross-legged as he continuously breathed in and out. His face was sometimes flushed red, sometimes pale, and there was even a faint aura of blood between his mouth and nose. In the large room, there was even the faint sound of a dead soul chanting. The Immortal scripture was a legendary killing technique. If one wanted to cultivate this supreme technique, they would have to experience 9 deaths and 9 lives before they could step through the threshold. The hardships involved were not something that outsiders could understand. The Immortal scripture did not need too much spiritual energy. It needed to absorb blood and soul essence from slaughter to continuously strengthen its cultivation. In the Blood Sea battlefield, there were all kinds of creatures. Yi Xian had been fighting for 4 years, and had already cultivated the Immortal scripture to the small success stage. However, when Yi Xian returned to the human world, this world was already at the end of its cultivation. There was no spiritual energy in this world, nor were there any living creatures for Yi Xian to slaughter. Every bit of his cultivation could be said to be extremely precious. And this time, Yi Xian had displayed his strength and saved everyone on the plane, which had consumed a large amount of his cultivation. At this moment, he was sitting cross-legged and cultivating, trying to stabilize his body, hoping to recover some of his vitality. Of course, Yi Xian didn't save everyone on the plane out of pity. He only did this because he wanted the Azure Dragon to owe him a favor, because once he stepped into the capital, he would definitely have a conflict with the Yi family. If he really started a massacre, the Martial Security Department would definitely interfere. As for the Azure Dragon, he was the leader of the Martial Security Department's Earth Group, and the power in his hands was even greater. If the Azure Dragon owed him a favor, the Martial Security Department would naturally turn a blind eye to it. This was also the decision that Yi Xian had made after a long period of consideration. Ring, ring, ring. The sound of the phone ringing made Yi Xian slowly open his eyes. He picked up the phone on the table, and sure enough, it was a call from the Azure Dragon. Hello? Mr. Yi, tell me, did you save the people on the plane? On the other end of the phone, the Azure Dragon's voice was trembling to the extreme. Even his voice contained uncontrollable excitement. Only you and I know about this. I hope you can keep this a secret. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said directly. After Yi Xian admitted this matter, the other end of the phone suddenly fell silent. After a few breaths of time, the Azure Dragon said with a trembling voice, "Do you know that you saved everyone on the plane? It has already alarmed many big shots. The Martial Security Department has even ordered that you must be found no matter what." Yi Xian frowned, and a self-deprecating look flashed across his eyes. It seemed that he had underestimated modern technology, and had actually exposed it to outsiders. Azure Dragon, if you want to step into the Xiantian realm, you'd better keep this secret from me. You should know that I don't want to have any conflicts with China. If you reveal this matter, you should know what the consequences will be. Yi Xian warned. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he hung up the phone. On the other end of the phone, the Azure Dragon looked hesitant. After more than 10 minutes, he sighed and hid this secret in the bottom of his heart. He did not report it to the Martial Security Department. Although the Azure Dragon did not have much contact with Yi Xian, the first time the two of them met, the Yi Xian displayed a terrifying method. The Azure Dragon knew that the person in front of him was not someone that could be restrained by any power. This was also the reason why he gave the title of Guest Elder to Yi Xian in order to befriend him. Chapter 32. In the Presidential Suite. Yi Xian put away the phone, and waves of hunger came from his stomach. This made him frown slightly, and he had no choice but to open the door and walk outside. According to Yi Xian's cultivation, he had already abstained from eating, but this time, he had lost too much of his cultivation, and there was no blood-soul essence around him for him to absorb, so he could only replenish the blood-soul essence in his body with food. After asking the waiter, Yi Xian took the elevator directly to the top of the building. When the waiter opened the door of the restaurant for him, the luxurious scene in the restaurant was reflected in his eyes. Green grass, stars dotted the night sky, a pianist was playing music, and a few candles were lit in front of each table. Many men and women were sitting opposite each other, chatting and smiling in the range of elegant music. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yi Xian felt a little regretful. How was this a restaurant? It was simply a place for people to talk about love. However, since he was already here, Yi Xian had no intention of leaving, so he stepped into the restaurant. After finding a seat where he could see the night scenery outside and sitting down, the waiter quickly came to Yi Xian and placed a menu in front of him. "Sir, what would you like to eat?" the waiter asked with a smile. Looking at the English words on the menu, Yi Xian closed it directly, and then said to the waiter beside him, 15 kilograms of steak, medium well. "That's all for now. I'll call you if I need anything." As Yi Xian's voice fell, the waiter was stunned, and the way he looked at Yi Xian was extremely strange. One had to know that in the restaurants in Sky City, each steak was only a few ounces, and they were all flown in from foreign pastures. Moreover, the price ranged from hundreds to thousands of yuan. Yet, Yi Xian asked for 15 kilograms of steak. Was this a joke? Sir. You said you want 15 kilograms of steak, the waiter asked cautiously. When Yi Xian repeated it again, the waiter finally confirmed that he did not hear wrongly at all, which also surprised him. "Sir, are you able to eat 15 kilograms of steak?" Although the restaurant had to satisfy all the customers' requests, the waiter still asked cautiously. "That's not something you should be concerned about. Just do as I say." Yi Xian also knew that his actions were somewhat shocking, but his body was lacking in lifeblood. Without the blood-soul essence qi to replenish himself, he could only obtain the yuan qi he needed from food. The purpose of the restaurant was to serve the customers. The waiter quickly left to prepare the food that Yi Xian had ordered. As expected of a 5-star hotel, in less than 10 minutes, the 15 kilograms of steak Yi Xian ordered was pushed over by a dining cart. When the fragrant food was placed on the table, the other diners looked over at Yi Xian. "Who are you? Can he eat? I don't know where this nouveau riche came from. Maybe he has some money in his hands and is just here to show off." Sigh, there really are all kinds of people in the capital now. All sorts of discussions sounded out. Although their voices weren't loud, how could Yi Xian not hear them? However, Yi Xian did not care about the discussions of these mortals. He was currently lacking in lifeblood, and the food in front of him was the best supplement for him. Using a knife and fork, he carefully chewed. Yi Xian did not eat quickly, but he ate very seriously. Every piece of beef that he swallowed turned into wisps of yuan qi in his stomach. Although there was not much yuan qi, it was better than nothing. Time passed quickly. An hour later, the beef in front of Yi Xian gradually decreased. It was dinner time, and the number of people entering and leaving the restaurant gradually increased. "Qingzhu, I've already made a reservation. This way, please." Suddenly, a warm and genial male voice sounded. A young man and woman walked in from outside. The man's face was like jade, like Pan An's reincarnation. He wore an expensive suit and was smiling at the woman beside him. She had a head of black hair and skin that looked like it was carved from ivory. There was not a trace of makeup on her face. When she opened and closed her eyes, they shone like stars. When she looked around, she gave off a cold and stunning temperament, like a fairy from the 9 heavens. A perfect pair, a golden boy and a jade girl. It seemed to be describing this young man and woman. It was as if they were the only ones in the world who could be so compatible. Silence. There was not a single sound. When the young man and woman entered the restaurant, all the customers who were eating immediately stopped. They looked at the young man and woman with eyes full of inferiority. Pan Ziyu looked at the scene in the restaurant with a smug look in his eyes. He was the eldest son of the Pan family. No matter where he went, he would be the center of attention. He enjoyed the envious gazes directed at him. Moreover, the goddess by his side had finally accepted his candlelight banquet. How could he not feel excited? Suddenly, when the restaurant fell silent, the sound of chewing could be heard. Although the sound was not loud, it was a little ear-piercing in the silence of the restaurant. Pan Ziyu frowned and looked towards the source of the sound. What he saw was naturally Yi Xian eating the steak on his plate. There really are all kinds of boorish people. Pan Ziyu snorted in dissatisfaction. Then, a smile appeared on his face. He was about to invite Xia Qingzhu to the reserved table, but when he saw Xia Qingzhu's beautiful face, he was suddenly stunned. What did Pan Ziyu see? At this moment, Xia Qingzhu's eyes were like stars as she stared fixedly at Yi Xian, who was currently eating. Her slender body was constantly trembling, and her originally rosy lips had actually turned pale, proving how agitated her heart was. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Xia Qingzhu did not know how long she had walked, but she still arrived in front of Yi Xian. When she saw the sight of Yi Xian's face, she felt as if she had lost her soul. Although Yi Xian was eating, he could sense with his divine sense that someone was walking towards him. This made him slowly raise his head to look at the person. In the blink of an eye, his thoughts were in chaos. When Yi Xian and Xia Qingzhu's gazes met, the time and space in this area seemed to have suddenly stopped. Astonishment, shock, and self-mockery. These emotions flashed through Yi Xian's eyes one by one. He never thought that he would see his former childhood sweetheart on his first day in the capital. You didn't die." Xia Qingzhu tried her best to calm her agitated emotions. She wanted to appear calmer, but her voice could not help but tremble slightly. "I haven't seen you in 4 years, but you're still so beautiful." At this moment, Yi Xian regained his calm. The complicated emotions in his eyes disappeared, and his voice was very calm. Yi Xian, how did you survive? Xia Qingzhu seemed to remember the night she left Jiangnan Hospital. Her delicate face was a little pale. Maybe my life is tough. Even the heavens can't take it from me. Yi Xian laughed at himself. The knife and fork in his hand cut the steak again and kept sending it into his mouth. Chapter 33. That's right. No matter what, you are still a descendant of the Yi clan. Your father wouldn't have just let you die back then. He must have found the best doctor for you, right? Xia Qingzhu's eyes brightened as if she had guessed the reason Yi Xian had survived. Unfortunately, Yi Xian remained silent. However, in Xia Qingzhu's eyes, Yi Xian had clearly admitted to it. Reuniting after 4 years, the two of them seemed to have forgotten about their parting in the hospital. After a few simple greetings, Xia Qingzhu's surging emotions gradually calmed down. Xia Qingzhu discovered that the two of them could never return to how they were before. They were like strangers, exchanging questions and answers. This also made her feel relieved. She began to treat Yi Xian as an ordinary friend. Her cold temperament gradually became more prominent. Qingzhu, who is this friend? Can you introduce him to me? Pan Ziyu had arrived before the two of them at some point. However, there was a faint trace of hostility in his gaze as he looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, this is the eldest son of the Pan clan. Today, I'm discussing some family business with him. I didn't expect to see you again, Xia Qingzhu said gently. Hello, Brother Yi. I'm Pan Ziyu. Nice to meet you. Pan Ziyu smiled and extended his hand to shake Yi Xian's hand. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not move. He did not even bother to look at Pan Ziyu. This caused Pan Ziyu to be stunned. Shame and anger flashed through his eyes as he awkwardly withdrew his hand. Seeing Yi Xian's appearance, Xia Qingzhu frowned slightly. However, she did not say anything. Instead, she turned to Pan Ziyu and said, Brother Pan, I still have some matters to attend to today. How about we talk another day? Since his goddess had spoken, Pan Ziyu naturally did not dare to insist. He could only smile awkwardly and bid farewell to Xia Qingzhu. However, before he left, he looked at Yi Xian with a trace of jealousy and hatred. I didn't think that after 4 years, you would still be so unruly, Xia Qingzhu sighed helplessly. Unruly? Yi Xian murmured. Then, he looked at Xia Qingzhu and said calmly, back then, you ignored your family's dissuasion and got together with me. Wasn't it also because you liked my unruly personality? Xia Qingzhu's face reddened at the mention of the past. Then, she regained her cool and said, we were still young back then. Now, it seems like it was just a child's play. Child's play? I think so. Yi Xian smiled indifferently. The figure of Xia Qingzhu in his memory gradually blurred in his mind, and the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. What's your occupation now? Are you managing Uncle Ye's company? Xia Qingzhu broke the silence. Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said, it's just a nominal position in a department in China. It's not much of a job. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving first. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he got up from his seat and prepared to end this reunion after 4 years. Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could take a few steps, Xia Qingzhu's voice came from behind him. It made Yi Xian stop in his tracks, but he didn't turn around at all. Yi Xian, I know you've had a hard time all these years. Although you can't inherit the Yi family's position, you can't give up on yourself. You have to pull yourself together and show Uncle Yi that his son isn't someone who's just waiting to die. In Xia Qingzhu's eyes, Yi Xian didn't die. It was obvious that the Yi family had found a world-class doctor to save his life. And in these 4 years, Yi Xian didn't appear in her eyes. He must have been arranged by the Yi family to hold a nominal position in a small company and muddle through these 4 years. Dang dang dang. The sound of high heels could be heard. Xia Qingzhu came to Yi Xian's side and said solemnly, Yi Xian, no matter what, you're still my friend. I hope you can pull yourself together and show Uncle Yi what an outstanding son he has. As Xia Qingzhu spoke, she took out a gold card from her bag and stuffed it into Yi Xian's hand. She said, "You must have returned to the capital to celebrate your grandfather's birthday. There's 5 million in this card. Tomorrow is his birthday. Take this money and choose some gifts. This can also ease your relationship with the Yi family." From the beginning to the end, Yi Xian remained silent. He looked at the gold card in his hand indifferently. A trace of contempt flashed across his eyes. Under Xia Qingzhu's astonished gaze, Yi Xian casually stuffed the gold card into the charity donation box set up in the restaurant and walked out of the restaurant. "I'll accept your 5 million, but give this money to the children in the poor mountainous areas." Yi Xian gradually walked away. He didn't bother to explain to Xia Qingzhu. Xia Qingzhu looked at Yi Xian's disappearing figure with an extremely complicated expression in her eyes. In the hotel room, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. As he breathed in and out, a misty bloody light bloomed slightly. Suddenly, Yi Xian opened his eyes. A terrifying bloody light flashed across his eyes, and an explosion sounded in the air. Huff! Yi Xian exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He walked out of bed and looked at the waning moon in the sky. His cold voice sounded in the room. "So tomorrow is that old man's birthday. Looks like I came at the right time," Yi Xian said with a smile. However, his smile was extremely strange and gave people a sense of coldness. Today's encounter with Xia Qingzhu had caused Yi Xian's mind to waver a little. She even misunderstood him as a muddle-headed cripple. However, in Yi Xian's heart, he had already cut off the connection between him and Xia Qingzhu. From now on, the two of them would never cross paths again. Yi Xian also wouldn't explain to her that he was an immortal cultivator, an existence that transcended mortals. If he really did so, Yi Xian would feel that he was nothing more than a brainless idiot. Since he didn't care, why did he have to say so much? And this was Yi Xian's truest thought. The next morning, a set of ancient black clothes and a blood-red sword were placed on the coffee table. The morning sun rose from the east. The golden sunlight shone through the hotel's doors and windows into the room, making the two items shine with a mysterious splendor. The ancient clothes were called the Blood Sea Battle Suit, and the sword was called the Bloodthirsty Demon Sword. These two items were created by Yi Xian in the Blood Sea battlefield. Every time Yi Xian wanted to slaughter living beings, he would put on the Blood Sea Battle Suit and wield the Bloodthirsty Demon Sword. The corpses of countless living beings would be piled up at his feet. The Yi family. These two simple words were an obsession in Yi Xian's heart. Back then, when he and his mother were chased out of the family, they had been ridiculed and ridiculed. Yi Xian was a vengeful person, and he had never forgotten this grudge. Wearing the Blood Sea Battle Suit, wielding the Bloodthirsty Demon Sword, and letting his gray hair down, Yi Xian seemed to have once again transformed into the undying heavenly lord of the Blood Sea battlefield. Pushing open the door and walking out of the hotel, Yi Xian strolled through the bustling streets. However, his attire was out of place with others, and attracted the curious gazes of many passers-by. Yi Xian didn't care about the gazes of the people around him. The direction he was heading in was the familiar Yi family courtyard in his memory. Chapter 34. The Yi family was one of the 8 major families in the capital. In the entire Xia country, the Yi family could be considered a first-rate family in the Xia country. In the military, political, and business world, there were many members of the Yi family who held important positions. The head of the family, Yi Zhanghai, was once a big shot in the political world of the Xia country. Although he had retired now, his influence was not to be outdone. It was a simple and grand courtyard house. Although the walls were slightly modeled, in a place like the capital, the value of such a courtyard house was simply immeasurable. Gongs, drums, and firecrackers rang in the sky. In front of the Yi family courtyard, countless luxurious cars were parked there, and there was an endless stream of people shuttling in and out. If there were reporters here, they would definitely be shocked to discover that everyone who entered the Yi family courtyard was a famous person in the military, political, and business world. Today was a joyous day. It was Yi Zhanghai's 70th birthday. A large longevity word was pasted everywhere in the Yi family courtyard, and there were dozens of birthday banquet tables. The noise of the guests was endless. Qingzhu, today is the old man's 70th birthday. Uncle is very happy that you can come. There's no need for gifts. Yi Hanchuan smiled and looked at Xia Qingzhu in front of him with a doting look in his eyes. Xia Taijun laughed and said, Old Yi, what are you saying? How can we be rude on old man Ye's birthday? Qingzhu, hurry up and greet Uncle Yi. Hello, Uncle Yi, Xia Qingzhu said politely. Good, good, good. Yi Hanchuan said, good, 3 times. His eyes turned slightly and he directly called his son, Yi Yu, who was beside him, and said, Qingzhu, it's not easy for you to come to our house. You have to get closer to her. Yi Yu was wearing a black suit and gold-rimmed glasses. He gave off a gentle feeling. He smiled warmly at Xia Qingzhu and said, Qingzhu, long time no see. Let's take a seat. Oh, isn't this Qingzhu's niece? Without waiting for Xia Qingzhu and her father to take a seat, a coquettish laughter followed. A middle-aged man and woman walked out from the inner courtyard, followed by a young man. Qingzhu greets uncles and aunts, Xia Qingzhu said politely. Yi Canghai had 3 sons in total. Yi Hanchuan and his son were from the 2nd branch, and the one walking towards Xia Qingzhu was from the 3rd branch. If Yi Xian was here, he would definitely recognize that the woman walking in front of him was the wife of his biological father, Yi Canghao. Moreover, this woman's background was not small. She was the eldest daughter of one of the 8 great families in the capital, the Nangong family. Behind her were naturally Yi Xian's biological father, Yi Canghao, and his younger brother, Yi Ping. Ping, why aren't you greeting your sister Qingzhu? Nangong Yun turned around and said to Yi Ping with a gentle smile. Greetings, sister Qingzhu. Yi Ping and Yi Ling were twins and Yi Xian's biological brother. At this moment, he was wearing a casual suit and smiling at Xia Qingzhu. You're Yi Xian's younger brother, right? Looking at Yi Ping in front of her, Xia Qingzhu's eyes lit up and she asked him directly. As Xia Qingzhu's voice fell, Nangong Yun's expression changed slightly, but she didn't say anything. On the other hand, Yi Ping was stunned and Yi Xian's appearance appeared in his mind. However, he slowly shook his head and said, Yi Xian is indeed my elder brother, but he has passed away many years ago. Passed away many years ago? Hearing Yi Ping's words, Xia Qingzhu's expression changed. She had just met Yi Xian yesterday. How could he have passed away many years ago? Just as Xia Qingzhu was puzzled, Yi Canghao said in a low voice, Qingzhu, that unfilial son has died long ago. Don't mention him on such a joyous day. Yi Canghao was Yi Xian's biological father. He was dressed in a military uniform and had a serious expression on his face. He gave off a sense of majesty and was extraordinarily handsome. Although he was already middle-aged, he gave off the aura of a mature man. Okay, let's not talk about him. Let's take our seats. Old master is coming out soon. Nangong Yun smiled and let everyone enter the banquet hall. Secretary General Wu Hen has arrived. Vice Chancellor of the Supreme Court has arrived. Major General Chen has arrived. Pan family has arrived. Xiao family has arrived. During the banquet, news of the arrival of various big shots came from time to time, making the banquet even more lively. Ha! A burst of heroic laughter rang out. A silver-haired old man walked out from the inner hall accompanied by the Yi clan's 1st branch. He even cupped his hands towards the guests present and said, I didn't expect that on this old man's 70th birthday, all of you would come to congratulate me. This old man truly feels ashamed. Congratulations to Old Master Yi for your great fortune and longevity. Today is Old Master Ye's 10th birthday. By the time you turn 80, you'll probably have a great-grandchild, right? All sorts of congratulatory words came from the banquet, making Yi Canghai respond to them one by one with a smile. At this moment, Xia Qingzhu sat in the main seat of the banquet hall with a look of bewilderment on her beautiful face. Ever since she entered the banquet hall, not only did she not see Yi Xian, but she also heard from Yi Ping and Yi Canghao that Yi Xian had long died. That made her feel uneasy. Xia Qingzhu knew that she had guessed wrongly. Yi Xian did not rely on the Yi family to survive, and the Yi family did not know that Yi Xian was still alive. Besides, Xia Qingzhu could tell from Yi Canghao's attitude that, as Yi Xian's biological father, Yi Canghao did not have any kinship with Yi Xian at all. What exactly is going on? Xia Qingzhu muttered to herself. Sister Qingzhu, what's wrong with you? Yi Ping asked. Don't you know that your brother is not dead? Xia Qingzhu could no longer control the doubts in her heart as she asked Yi Ping directly. Silence. There was dead silence. When Xia Qingzhu said that, not only was Yi Ping stunned on the spot, even Yi Canghao and Nangong Yun who were at the same table looked at Xia Qingzhu with bewilderment in their eyes. No, impossible. Big brother was terminally ill back then. How could he have survived? Yi Ping's voice trembled slightly, and he even forced a smile at Xia Qingzhu. Clearly, he did not believe what Xia Qingzhu said. Dong! 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 It was as if the war drums of the dead were beating and thunder from the nine heavens were exploding. When a series of heavy footsteps sounded in the Yi family's courtyard, a lonely figure was slowly entering the banquet hall. Little brother, I'm here to take you home. Dressed in a black ancient robe and holding a blood-red sword, Yi Xian's gray hair swayed without wind. When he walked towards Yi Ping, his calm voice sounded at this moment. Everything was silent and the world was silent. When Yi Xian appeared, Yi Ping's eyes widened and he stared at Yi Xian in front of him. Yi Canghao and his wife seemed to have lost their souls as they could not believe what they were seeing at all. Big brother? Yi Ping suddenly got up from his seat, his body trembling uncontrollably. Chapter 35. Silence, silence, extreme silence. Yi Xian's appearance not only made Yi Ping feel like he was in a dream, but he also couldn't believe that not only was his elder brother not dead, but he even appeared in front of him alive. Yi Xian. You. Looking at Yi Xian who was dressed in an ancient costume and exuding an unapproachable aura, Xia Qingzhu wanted to say something but hesitated as an ominous feeling arose in her heart. Canghao, this is your son, right? Nangong Yun snapped back to her senses and looked at Yi Canghao, her voice filled with sarcasm. Little brother, come with me. Mother and sister are waiting for you at home. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't even bother to look at Nangong Yun. He looked at Yi Ping silently and said in a low voice. Big brother. Yi Ping looked down and didn't dare to look into Yi Xian's eyes. He was clearly hesitating. Humph. Nangong Yun got up slowly and walked directly to Yi Xian. She humphed coldly and said, I didn't expect you to be alive. This time, you came to the Yi family during Old Master's 70th birthday. Could it be that you and your bitch of a mother want to return to the Yi family? When Nangong Yun finished speaking, Yi Xian finally retracted his gaze from Yi Ping and looked at Nangong Yun slowly with a calm expression. However, his next action completely caused an uproar among the guests at the birthday banquet. Smack! A resounding slap rang out, and Nangong Yun was sent flying. A few bloody teeth fell to the ground, and her body smashed the banquet table she was sitting on. Thud, thud, thud. While everyone was in shock, Yi Xian strolled forward until he was in front of Nangong Yun. He suddenly stepped on her face and continuously ground his foot. Yi Xian looked down at Nangong Yun and said in a cold voice, Do you still remember? Back then, you used a whip to whip me and my son. You even used all sorts of methods to drive us out of the Yi clan. I remember all of this in my mind. Being stepped on by Yi Xian, Nangong Yun's face swelled up and blood flowed out of her mouth. She never thought that Yi Xian would dare to touch her. Your mother is a slut and you are a bastard, this is a fact that can never be changed. Nangong Yun howled hysterically, like a crazy woman. Crack! Yi Xian's foot landed, and several of Nangong Yun's ribs were broken. A miserable howl came from her mouth. Yi Xian, you little bastard! Kill me if you can! Yi Tsong Hao, you coward! Hurry up and take care of this little bastard! Unfilial son, stop! Suddenly, Yi Tsong Hao's face darkened. He strode towards Yi Xian. Unfilial son, you're too presumptuous. Why aren't you letting go? Yi Tsong Hao said with a gloomy face. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't even care about Yi Tsong Hao's rebuke. His foot was still on Nangong Yun's chest, and the corner of his mouth curved into a cruel smile. Do you know that today is the day you die? Xing! A bloody light pierced through the air. A sharp sword was unsheathed, and the sound of the sword rang out. The cold glint of the sword was directly on Nangong Yun's forehead, as if it would kill her in the next moment. Tsong Hao, you gave birth to a good son. Yi Tsong Hai walked over with an ugly expression. There were many guests beside him, and they surrounded Yi Xian. Father! Looking at Yi Tsong Hai's gloomy expression, Yi Tsong Hao's heart also tensed up. It was Yi Tsong Hai's birthday today, and such a thing happened. Wouldn't this be a joke to outsiders? No matter what, Yi Xian was still his son. Now that such a thing had happened, he would definitely be punished by Yi Tsong Hai in the end. The position of the head of the family that he coveted was probably in jeopardy. However, in an instant, Yi Tsong Hao figured everything out. That also made him look at Yi Xian with an extremely sinister gaze. Kid, no matter what, she's still your stepmother. Let her go, Yi Tsong Hai ordered Yi Xian, showing the bearing of a superior. Brother, let auntie go, Yi Ping also quickly persuaded Yi Xian. Auntie? Yi Ping's words directly made Yi Xian frown. He then slowly looked at Yi Ping and said, say it again. What did you call her just now? Looking at Yi Xian's cold eyes, Yi Ping's body suddenly turned cold. However, under the gaze of everyone in the Yi family, he could only look down, not daring to look into Yi Xian's eyes. He said, Brother, no matter what, you and I have the blood of the Yi family flowing in our bodies. Although she's not our biological mother, she's still father's wife. Nangong Yun, who was being stepped on by Yi Xian, laughed out loud and said, Yi Xian, you little bastard. You still want to take your brother away from the Yi family? Ask him if he's willing. At this moment, Yi Xian closed his eyes slightly, and the veins in his hand that was holding the blood sword were bulging. He already knew that his underling would definitely not leave the Yi family with him. Is it for glory and wealth? Yi Xian murmured. When he opened his eyes again to look at Yi Ping, he said softly, or, is it for the so-called position of the Yi family's head? Yi Xian's voice became calmer, but when Yi Ping heard it, his face turned pale and his body trembled slightly. After more than 10 breaths, he suddenly raised his head to look at Yi Xian, his face extremely flushed. Yes, I'm doing it for glory and wealth. I'm doing it to become a superior person. Do you know how hard we've been living in Jiangnan? I don't want to be an ordinary person for the rest of my life, and the Yi family can give me everything I want. At this moment, Yi Ping's expression seemed to be crazy as he continuously yelled at Yi Xian. Brother, wake up. We all have the blood of the Yi family in our bodies. We're born to be superior. Why do you keep going against the Yi family? Brother, let auntie go. I'll definitely plead for mercy on your behalf to grandpa and father, Yi Ping yelled loudly, as if he wanted to vent all the resentment that he had been suppressing all these years. Ping, you're right. Don't worry, as long as auntie is alive, I'll definitely treat you like my own son. Although she was being stepped on by Yi Xian, Nangong Yun was overjoyed when she saw Yi Xian's gloomy expression. She kept praising Yi Ping. Little brother, for the so-called glory and wealth, for the so-called superior, are you really going to give up on mother and Linger? Yi Xian moved his foot away from Nangong Yun's body, and the blood-colored sword in his hand drooped slightly. Faced with Yi Xian's question, Yi Ping bit his lips tightly and couldn't answer for a long time. That also made Yi Xian laugh self-deprecatingly and stop looking at Yi Ping. Unfilial son, look at what you've done. Why aren't you kneeling down and apologizing to your auntie? Seeing that Yi Xian had already let go of Nangongyun, Yi Xian's expression softened a little, but he still reprimanded Yi Xian sternly. Apologize? At this moment, a gentle breeze blew past, causing Yi Xian's gray hair to flutter in the wind. A cruel smile appeared on his face. Chapter 36. Clang! The sword chi clanged and sanguine light filled the sky. When the bloodthirsty demon sword was unsheathed, the sanguine light bloomed in the Yi family's courtyard and an extremely terrifying aura swept in all directions. Yi Xian seemed to have once again transformed into the immortal heavenly lord in the bloody battlefield. When he opened and closed his eyes, there seemed to be an endless sea of blood surging in his eyes. Buzz! It was as if the clear sky had exploded and Yama was after her life. Yi Xian took a step forward and directly appeared in front of Nangongyun. The bloodthirsty demon sword was placed horizontally at her throat, and the cold blade seemed to have blood flowing through it. At this moment, Yi Xian was in a slightly deranged state. As long as he gently slashed the bloodthirsty demon sword, he would be able to take Nangongyun's life. However, he did not kill Nangongyun directly. Instead, he looked at Yi Songhai and his son mockingly and cruelly. Pushed! Little bastard, what are you trying to do? Unfilial son, if you dare to kill your mother, I'll make sure you die a horrible death. Yi Songhai and his son were no longer in the mood to think about why Yi Xian was an ancient martial artist. At this moment, Nangongyun was in danger, and if she really died there, the Nangong family would definitely not let the matter rest. Brother, what are you doing? Hurry and stop, Yi Ping pleaded loudly with a pale face. At the critical moment, everyone was terrified and shocked by Yi Xian. Xia Qingzhu stared blankly at the man in front of her who had a murderous aura. There was an extremely complicated look in her eyes. So you're an ancient martial artist? No wonder, Xia Qingzhu laughed self-deprecatingly. She originally thought that Yi Xian had become a good-for-nothing in the past 4 years, but after seeing it today, she finally realized that he had become an ancient martial artist and was no longer the weak young man he used to be. However, was it really as Xia Qingzhu had thought? Was Yi Xian really just an ancient martial artist? Dark clouds pressed down and thunder rumbled. It was winter now, and yet, such a strange phenomenon appeared in the sky. The citizens of Capital City saw it as a great spectacle, but no one knew that such a terrifying phenomenon was caused by Yi Xian. In the Yi family's courtyard, the King Yen Luo of Hell seizes souls, while the King Yen Luo of Hell demands lives. Yi Xian placed his sword horizontally across Nangongyun's throat. He was currently smiling. This smile was indescribable, but when the father and son of the Yi clan saw it, they felt as though they had fallen into a dark abyss. Even their souls were trembling slightly. Yi Xian! Yi Xian! Don't kill me! I beg you! Nangongyun wasn't a stupid person. If she still couldn't sense Yi Xian's killing intent, then she would have lived in vain for so many years. Begging humbly, no longer as arrogant as before. This was Nangongyun's current state. Yi Xian, you can't kill her. Whatever you want, I can satisfy you. At this point, Yi Zhonghao's face was deathly pale and he lowered his stance. Although he and Nangongyun were only married for political reasons, he couldn't let Nangongyun die. Otherwise, his position in the Yi clan would be in danger. Yi Zonghai also calmed down from his rage and said in a gentler tone, Xian, you are a descendant of the Yi clan. Grandpa was wrong in the past. As long as you spare her life, you and your mother can be reinstated into the Yi clan's genealogy. Unfortunately, Yi Xian wasn't moved by the promises of the Yi family's father and son. He only had a cruel smile on his face. Die! The blood sword flew through the air, killing everything. When Nangongyun's head was separated from her body, blood spurted out from her neck and dyed the ground red. A headless corpse twitched on the ground. Such a bloody and cruel scene made everyone fall silent. Nangongyun is dead? Who is this person? Doesn't he know how terrifying the Yi clan is? He really has guts. I'm afraid this person will be buried here today. The surrounding guests were the first to regain their senses. They made a lot of noise and looked at Yi Xian as if they were looking at a dead person. Even though everyone present could see that Yi Xian was an ancient martial artist, the Yi clan was one of the 8 great clans in the capital. Their background was also extraordinary. If a mere ancient martial artist could be so presumptuous in the Yi clan, then the Yi clan would have been removed from the capital long ago. Yi Xian, you. Are you crazy? You killed her, you will also die. Looking at the bloody scene in front of her, Xia Qingzhu's face turned pale. She couldn't understand why Yi Xian would be so reckless. Traitor, unfilial son, you dare to kill your mother? Yi Cunghao roared, his body trembling. Everyone, today is this old man's birthday. However, my unfilial son killed his stepmother. I ask everyone to be witnesses. My Yi clan will place righteousness before family. Yi Cunghao slowly retreated. He looked at Yi Xian as if he was looking at a dead person. Unknowingly, dozens of ancient martial arts experts had already surrounded the Yi family's courtyard. Every one of them exuded an extremely extraordinary aura. The leader was an old man in his 50s. The aura around his body surged endlessly. When his eyes opened and closed, they shone brightly. It was clear that he was a martial arts expert. Mr. Gu, sorry to trouble you. Yi Cunghao cupped his hands and bowed. Elder Yi, there is no need for this. However, this person is a descendant of your Yi clan. If I am too harsh and kill him, this... Gu Yaobang wanted to say something but stopped. My Yi clan doesn't want this kind of son who killed his stepmother. Yi Cunghao said firmly. Good. Gu Yaobang received a satisfactory answer and slowly walked towards Yi Xian. The bluestone floor under his feet shattered with every step he took. Yi Xian, run quickly. He is an ancient martial arts grandmaster. You will die. Seeing Gu Yaobang appear, Xia Qingzhu's face turned pale. She warned Yi Xian loudly because she knew that this Mr. Gu was an honored guest of the 8 great clans of the capital. His martial arts cultivation was extremely terrifying. Even though Yi Xian was also an ancient martial arts practitioner, how could he be a match for Gu Yaobang? Qingzhu, shut up. What nonsense are you talking about? Xia Taijun held his breath and directly scolded his daughter. Clearly, at this moment, if he had anything to do with Yi Xian, wouldn't he be inviting trouble? Young man, you only know basic martial arts, yet you dare to kill people here. Didn't your teacher tell you that there are some people you can't afford to offend? Gu Yaobang strode over as if he was passing judgment on everything. It was as if he didn't take Yi Xian seriously at all. If you surrender now, I can still spare your life. Otherwise, before Gu Yaobang could finish speaking, his hair suddenly stood on end. A great terror of life and death struck his mind, making him unable to continue speaking. Buzz! The void shifted and the air exploded. Yi Xian took a step forward. His terrifying physical body tore through the air and directly appeared in front of Gu Yaobang. Under Gu Yaobang's horrified gaze, Yi Xian's jade-like palm directly grabbed his neck. A dead man still has so much nonsense to say. Crack! Yi Xian's 5 fingers exploded with a terrifying force. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. Gu Yaobang's eyes were wide open and his neck was irregularly twisted. A large amount of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely horrified expression. Poof! 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 Blood flowed out from his mouth uncontrollably. Gu Yaobang stared at Yi Xian in front of him. His voice of disbelief rang out intermittently. You're... Xiantian. Before Gu Yaobang could finish speaking, his neck was broken by Yi Xian. He died tragically in Yi Xian's hands. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. In the Yi family courtyard, not only were the Yi family members scared out of their wits, but even the guests present were retreating in horror. They looked at Yi Xian with extreme fear in their eyes. Bang! Casually throwing Gu Yaobang's corpse to the ground, Yi Xian looked around at the guests. His cold voice also echoed in the Yi family courtyard. Today, I'm going to start a massacre. Those who have nothing to do with it, please leave. Chapter 37. All the guests who came to the Yi family's birthday celebration were of extraordinary status. They were big shots who could make the Xia tremble with a stomp of their feet. However, there was an old saying that was very good. When an ordinary man was angry, blood would splatter within 5 steps. Within 10 steps, he could kill all his enemies. The meaning of this sentence was that even if you had the power of a country and held supreme power, within 10 steps, a boorish fellow could take your life. Moreover, Yi Xian was not a reckless man. In his eyes, no matter who you were, unless you were a legendary god, you were no different from an ant in his eyes. The guests present were all sophisticated people. They understood the current situation very well. Everyone looked hesitant. Obviously, they were thinking of retreating. Before the guests could make a decision, dozens of ancient warriors took the lead. Yi Xian, I'm sorry. We are no match for him. Goodbye. Several ancient martial art practitioners looked ashamed. They cupped their hands and bowed to Yi Songhai before leaping out of the Yi family compound. Yi Xian, I'll return the 30 million. Take care of yourself. A transforming strength master shook his head and sneered. He walked out of the door. 30 million was tempting, but compared with his life, he knew very well what to choose. The dozens of ancient warriors left in 2s and 3s. Facing a terrifying man who could easily kill Gu Yaobang, they couldn't even muster a trace of fighting spirit. The whole place was silent and the atmosphere was heavy. Yi Songhai and his son looked terrible. Although they hated the shameless faces of these ancient warriors, the key problem now was how to solve the problem in front of them. Little brother, where it's possible to make mistakes, one should forgive them. After all, you are also a descendant of the Yi family. Why don't we sit down and talk? A political boss stepped forward with a smile on his face. Who are you? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and asked. Let me introduce myself. I am the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Li Qi. Blood flashed and a head fell to the ground. Before the man could finish his words, the so-called Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue was killed by Yi Xian on the spot, turning into a headless corpse that fell to the ground. Hiss! Gasps could be heard from the guests present. Their expressions were filled with fear, and no one dared to stand up for the Yi family. Their gazes towards Yi Xian were filled with fear. I'll only give you 10 breaths of time. If you don't leave, then you'll never be able to leave. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the bloody light around him bloomed slightly. An extremely terrifying murderous intent erupted. It was obvious that he was not just saying it, but really wanted to kill. Elder Yi, we are powerless today. Please forgive us. One of the big shots in the political world cupped his hands and said goodbye. He didn't even say a word and directly walked out of the door with his family. With one person taking the lead, this silent fear instantly magnified. Guests continuously bid farewell and left, causing the faces of the Yi clan members to turn even paler. They looked at Yi Xian with even more fear in their eyes. Yi Xian, you little bastard. Even if you are an ancient martial arts grandmaster, do you really think that the Yi family is easy to bully? Thud, thud, thud. Numerous footsteps came from outside the door. Yi Hanchuan was seen leading hundreds of guards into the Yi family's courtyard. These guards were fully armed and had live ammunition. It was obvious that they had received formal training. Shoot him for me. Without any nonsense, Yi Hanchuan roared loudly. Hundreds of guards held submachine guns in their hands and directly pulled the trigger. The flames that tore everything apart shot towards Yi Xian. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of countless bullets whistling was heard, and hundreds of tongues of fire were raging. In the face of modern heavy weapons, Yi Xian sneered and didn't take them seriously at all. Kill! The King of Hell took lives, and the King of Hell took souls. Yi Xian slashed out with his sword and directly cut more than 10 guards in half. A large amount of blood spurted out, and an extremely strong smell of blood filled the entire Yi family's courtyard. Broken limbs and blood flowed like a river. Yi Xian seemed to have turned into an Asura from the underworld. A large number of floating corpses fell at his feet. Under the reflection of the blood on the ground, it made him even more terrifying. Why is it like this? Is he still human? Yi Hanchuan trembled all over. Looking at the hundreds of guards who died on the spot, he seemed to have lost his soul. He was completely shocked by Yi Xian's terrifying means. Boom! There was an explosion in the void. When the hundreds of guards were all dead, the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Yi Xian walked towards Yi Hanchuan step by step. Yi Hanchuan suddenly woke up when the bloodthirsty demonic sword was pressed against his throat. Xian! Don't kill me. I am your second uncle. Plop! When death really came, Yi Hanchuan directly collapsed to the ground. He looked at Yi Xian, who was full of murderous intent. His eyes were filled with uncontrollable fear, and he even humbly begged Yi Xian. Yi Xian, stop. You have killed enough people. No matter what grudges you have against the Yi clan, he is still your second uncle. Xia Qingzhu's face was pale, and a large amount of tears appeared in her eyes. She quickly walked towards Yi Xian, and when she opened her arms and hugged Yi Xian from behind, Yi Xian's ferocious expression gradually eased. The world was silent, and not a sound could be heard. When Xia Qingzhu hugged Yi Xian tightly, a glimmer of hope appeared in Yi Hanchuan's eyes. He looked at Xia Qingzhu with gratitude. Yi Hanchuan knew that Yi Xian and Xia Qingzhu were childhood sweethearts. If there was anyone present who could stop Yi Xian, it would be Xia Qingzhu. Yi Xian, Qingzhu begs you, let go of the hatred in your heart. Xia Qingzhu hugged Yi Xian tightly, and her choked voice slowly sounded. Let go? How? Yi Xian's ferocious expression disappeared, and his expression returned to normal. Come home with me, and let us return to the past. From now on, we will no longer care about these things, Xia Qingzhu said softly. Nephew Yi Xian, uncle was too harsh on you in the past. This is uncle's fault. Today, you have killed Nangang Yun and hundreds of lives in the Yi clan. Why don't you just let go? Xia Taijun even spoke to persuade him. Looking at the scene in front of him, Yi Canghai's expression changed several times. He quickly said, Grandson, this is all grandfather's fault. Please calm down. After Yi Canghai finished speaking, he gave Yi Canghao a meaningful glance. This caused Yi Canghao to feel ashamed and angry, but he still suppressed his anger and forced a smile towards Yi Xian. There's no such thing as an insurmountable obstacle between us, father and son. Father has let you and your mother down all these years, so I'll apologize to you. Poochie. Cold light flashed, and blood sprayed out. Just when everyone thought that Yi Xian was going to change his mind, the bloodthirsty demon's sword pierced through Yi Hanchuan's throat. When Yi Xian pulled back the sword, a large amount of blood flowed out from his throat. Yi Hanchuan directly turned into an ice-cold corpse, floating at Yi Xian's feet. Why? Isn't he your second uncle? Seeing this scene, Xia Qingzhu stuttered. Suddenly turning around, Yi Xian casually pushed Xia Qingzhu away, causing her to stumble and fall to the ground. Yi Xian calmly looked at the woman below him, and a cruel smile appeared on his lips. Chapter 38. When he ordered his men to shoot at me, he became my enemy. As my enemy, his only fate is death. Yi Xian smiled cruelly. However, when Xia Qingzhu saw it, she bit her lips tightly. She felt that the Yi Xian in front of her was extremely unfamiliar. You are not him. You are definitely not him. If you were him, how could you be so heartless? Xia Qingzhu said with a trembling voice. Yi Xian slowly shook his head as he looked at the fear in Xia Qingzhu's eyes. His voice was slightly ancient as he said, "I'm still me. This has never changed in the slightest. It's just that I've long since abandoned my weakness. Don't you think it's a bit laughable that you, Xia Qingzhu, are trying to use your past feelings to tie me down?" Yi Xian's words exposed Xia Qingzhu's thoughts. Xia Qingzhu was stunned. She looked at Yi Xian in a daze with a hint of self-mockery in her eyes. Xia Qingzhu knew that she was wrong, very wrong. Just as Yi Xian said, she did want to use their past feelings to tie Yi Xian down. However, she never thought that not only had she changed, but the weak young man of the past had already turned into a cold and heartless person. "Yi Xian, in your eyes, am I a scheming woman?" Xia Qingzhu muttered to herself. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not give any reply. This also made Xia Qingzhu's eyes flash with bitterness. She finally realized that she had no place in Yi Xian's heart. "Yi Xian, you bastard, give me back my father's life." Bang! 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 3 gunshots were heard and yellow bullets shot out. Yi Hanchuan was killed. As his son, how could Yi Yu not be sad and angry? This also made him completely crazy. He wanted to kill Yi Xian right there and then. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I will send you down to reunite with your father. Clang! A sword light flashed across the sky, cutting the weeds and eliminating the roots. A sword aura directly pierced Yi Yu's forehead, making his corpse lie in the Yi family's courtyard. "Bastard, you little bastard!" Yi Canghao roared. If there was medicine for regret in this world, he would have definitely killed this unfilial son back then. Otherwise, how could there be such a tragedy today? Boom! Yi Xian took a step forward, directly appearing in front of Yi Xian. This was the first time Yi Xian had looked him in the eye. "Do you remember? When I was 4 years old, I accidentally broke one of Nangong Yun's accessories. Because of Nangong Yun, you mercilessly whipped me. If it wasn't for my mother protecting me with all her might, perhaps I would have died under your whip." At this moment, Yi Xian put away the bloodthirsty demon's sword. He seemed to have sunk into his memories, and his voice became even calmer. "Unfilial son, if I can give birth to you, I can also kill you. This is the Tao of human relations." When Yi Xian mentioned the past, Yi Canghao's eyes flashed with guilt, but it quickly disappeared. Instead, he roared at Yi Xian. Looking at Yi Canghao's angry expression, Yi Xian's expression was very calm. He continued, "Perhaps you're right. If the father wants the son dead, the son has no choice but to die. However, my mother doesn't owe you anything. As your personal maid, not only did she take care of you in every possible way, she even gave birth to 3 children for you. Yet, you heartlessly abandoned her. If you hadn't left the Yi family so early back then, perhaps she would have died in Nangong Yun's hands. Today, I will settle this debt." The wind and clouds were calm, untainted by smoke and dust. Yi Xian was very calm. He slowly raised the bloodthirsty demon's sword in his hand and directly pressed it against Yi Xian's throat. It was as if Yi Xian only needed to lightly push the tip of the sword forward to end Yi Canghao's life. "You want to kill me?" Yi Canghao's expression was extremely complicated. He was just a mortal who was also afraid of the arrival of death. Even though he was a hedonistic young master when he was young and did many wrong things, Yi Canghao definitely couldn't bring himself to beg for mercy in front of his own son. The heavenly Tao is good at reincarnation. Who will the heavens spare? If it weren't for the cause back then, how could there be today's result? Yi Xian seemed calm, but in fact, his heart was in turmoil. He wasn't as calm as he appeared on the surface. "Brother, are you crazy?" Yi Ping quickly walked in front of Yi Xian and directly blocked Yi Xian behind him. There was even a trace of hostility in his eyes when he looked at Yi Xian. "For the so-called glory and wealth, for the sake of becoming a superior person, is this the reason you're stopping me?" Yi Xian said in a low voice. "Brother, the Yi family must not fall. This concerns my future. Take it that I'm begging you, let go, Yi Ping said in a trembling voice. Looking at Yi Ping in front of him, Yi Xian's body trembled slightly, and there was great bitterness in his eyes. His thoughts were in a trance, and a distant memory surfaced. It was when Yi Ping and his brother were sitting on a haystack when they were young. Brother, Yi Ping, swear to the heavens that one day, I will become a superior person and let Mother, Ling, and you live a prosperous life. I, Yi Xian's younger brother, was born extraordinary. As long as I'm alive, I will protect you for the rest of your life. The two children and brothers swore to the heavens on that haystack. Those scenes of the past flashed past Yi Xian's mind, but Yi Xian never thought that there would be such a scene today. Little brother, do you know that if you weren't my biological brother and if I wasn't afraid that Mother and Ling would be sad, I would definitely kill you today. From today onwards, you and I are no longer brothers. I hope you can take care of yourself. Yi Xian sheathed the bloodthirsty demon's sword, and the blood sea battle suit fluttered without any wind. His grayish-white hair danced in the air as Yi Xian suddenly turned around and walked out of the Yi family's house. Yi Xian now felt very tired, not physically but spiritually. He finally understood what the shadow said to him. There were many emotions and desires in the boundless mortal world, and if he returned to the mortal world, he would suffer the pain of the boundless mortal world. At this moment, Yi Xian really wanted to return to the Blood Sea battlefield. Over there was only endless slaughter, and there was nothing to worry about. However, in the boundless secular world, even though he could match the current world, it made him feel even more lonely. Looking at Yi Xian's lonely back, Yi Ping had a complicated expression. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. The father and son of the Yi family also heaved a sigh of relief. Clearly, they were able to escape from this calamity. That made the two of them sigh, but they didn't dare to say anything harsh to Yi Xian. Little brother, you've caused such a massacre today. Are you leaving just like that? All of a sudden. Before Yi Xian could walk out of the Yi family's house, the secretary of Wu and stepped forward and hundreds of ancient martial arts espers appeared behind him. Clearly, when Yi Xian slaughtered the Yi family, he had already mobilized the members of the Wu and department to support the Yi family. Screech, the sound of vehicles braking suddenly came from outside the Yi family's house. Dozens of military vehicles were parked in front of the door, and countless soldiers surrounded the Yi family's house. There were also many snipers lurking on the roofs. When many sophisticated high-tech weapons appeared in the hands of the soldiers, the secretary of Wu and department finally heaved a sigh of relief. He was full of confidence in capturing Yi Xian. Little brother, killing hundreds of people is a serious crime in Xia Nation. You may be an ancient martial arts guru, but there will be no exceptions. Come with me. As the secretary of Wu and department of Xia Nation, if he let Yi Xian leave easily, he would be done for. Besides, he also firmly believed that Yi Xian would have no choice but to surrender in the face of those high-tech weapons. Besides, he had the members of the Black-Yellow ancestors behind him. Chapter 39. All the land under the heavens belonged to the king, and all the people on the shores of the land were the king's subjects. In front of the colossus that was the Xia kingdom, individual bravery was never worth mentioning. If every ancient martial ability user could do whatever they wanted, the Xia kingdom would have fallen apart long ago. Yi Xian understood this very well, but he did not regret what he had done today. When he stepped into the Yi family, he was already somewhat prepared. At this moment, seeing that the Wuan Bureau had finally made a move, the father and son of the Yi family were overjoyed. Xia Qingzhu slowly shook her head, knowing that Yi Xian had already crossed the bottom line of the Xia kingdom. Little brother, you are so young, yet you are able to step into the realm of ancient martial arts grandmaster. Just based on this talent alone, you can be said to be 1 in 10,000. However, you have indiscriminately killed the innocent, so you will receive the punishment you deserve. The secretary of Wu En said righteously. The wind was calm and the clouds were calm. However, the clouds in the sky were rumbling and rolling, and the biting cold wind was howling between heaven and earth. Yi Xian stood in the Yi family's courtyard with his hands behind his back. His expression was neither sad nor happy, but when his eyes opened and closed, the scene of a sea of blood kept flashing across his eyes. Today, their brotherhood had been broken. Yi Xian was already mentally exhausted, and he was even more tired of the mortal world. However, the secretary of Wuan had blocked his way, which also caused a huge change in Yi Xian's mood. Who was Yi Xian? He was an immortal cultivator. He was the immortal heavenly lord. In this mortal world, he was a god, an immortal, a demon, and a devil. Like a demon, like an immortal, like a god. The cold wind howled violently, and Tongtian's bloody light rose from the ground. At this moment, Yi Xian had truly become the immortal heavenly lord, and an extremely terrifying killing force swept in all directions. Rumble. Thunder filled the sky, and the void exploded. The Yi family's courtyard shook violently, and the ground around Yi Xian cracked like a spider web. The bloodthirsty demon's sword buzzed incessantly, and a bleak bloody light bloomed from the sword's body. The merciless six desires looked down on the world. Yi Xian was finally impatient. Since he returned to the mortal world, many restraints had been placed on him, making him feel no sense of freedom. Many scruples had bound his hands and feet, and these emotions that he had been holding back for a long time finally completely erupted at this moment. Sword. When Yi Xian's voice pierced through the 9 heavens, an extremely terrifying thing happened. Clang clang clang. Faced with such a terrifying scene, the deputy chief of Wu Han's expression changed greatly. He was completely dumbfounded on the spot. As for the people of the Yi family and Xia Qingzhu, their eyes were wide open. They could not believe what they were seeing. Humans are like ants, not knowing the might of the heavens. Since you all want to die, I'll grant you your wish. Throwing away all loneliness and completely letting himself go, Yi Xian's true nature was completely exposed when he transformed into the immortal heavenly lord. His gray hair gradually turned blood red, and his blood sea battle suit fluttered without wind. When he opened and closed his eyes, it was as if there were 2 big stars rotating in his eyes, and the power that could destroy the heavens and the earth shook all directions. Kill! The blood sword swept across the sky, and killed all. A dazzling bloody light bloomed. When Yi Xian's sword finger fell, the bloodthirsty demon's sword moved along with Yi Xian's movement. A brilliant bloody light erupted from the sword's body, and it first slashed down at the Secretary of Wu and Security. Activate the Imperial Yuan Shield. Facing Yi Xian's unparalleled attack, the Secretary of Wu and Security's back was instantly drenched in cold sweat, and he roared even more violently. Buzz! A colorful light curtain appeared, and the high-tech weapons in the hands of hundreds of soldiers instantly emitted extremely terrifying beams of light. However, in an instant, a terrifying light curtain was formed in front of the Secretary of Wu and Security. Bang! It was like an egg hitting a rock. The light curtain exploded, and the Secretary of Wu and Security was directly blasted dozens of feet away like a kite with a broken string. His body was covered in cracks, and a large amount of blood kept flowing out from all parts of his body. If he was not an ancient martial arts master and had an extremely strong physical body, he would have turned into a cold corpse by now. Boom! He took a step forward, and the earth shook. Before the members of the yellow and black teams could react, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of the Secretary of Wu and Security. The bloodthirsty demon's sword floating beside him bloomed with a bloody sword light that could devour people. Don't worry about me. Kill him. At this time, the Secretary of Wu and Security finally realized that the person in front of him was not an ancient martial arts master, but an inhuman existence. Do it. The members of the black and yellow teams of Wu and Security were all made up of ancient martial artists and mutants. At this moment, their immediate superior was in danger, which made them instantly launch their strongest attacks at Yi Xian. Spiritual attacks, fire and water techniques, and sharp earth thorns drilled out from under Yi Xian's feet. A large number of ancient martial artists released their energy and attacked Yi Xian violently. Bang! 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 The bloody light shield was impenetrable. Before the members of the two teams could get close, a bloody light curtain rose around Yi Xian, directly blocking their attacks. He just narrowed his eyes and looked at the Secretary of Wu and Security. A cold killing intent slowly rose from his eyes. You asked for it. You can't blame me for this. Yi Xian said maliciously. He slowly raised his sword fingers, and the bloodthirsty demon's sword buzzed excitedly, as if it would kill this person in the next moment. At the same time, in an unknown space in the Blood Sea battlefield, the endless Blood Sea was churning, and the bloody halberd spanned across the Blood Sea. The Tongtian's earth-shattering killing intent bloomed on the halberd, and the cries of billions of souls came from the halberd. Rumble. The sea of blood overturned the sky, and the ghosts howled miserably. The 1,000-foot-long blood halberd suddenly erupted with a bloody light that reached the heavens, illuminating the entire battlefield. At the same time, the 1,000-foot-long blood halberd underwent an extremely strange change. Buzz! The bloody halberd, which was originally thousands of feet long, was gradually shrinking until it was 3 feet long. This ancient ominous weapon actually broke the space barrier and disappeared from the Blood Sea battlefield. Kakik! When the bloody halberd disappeared without a trace, the endless Blood Sea suddenly churned. A terrifying and creepy laughter resounded throughout the Blood Sea battlefield, and countless bloody figures escaped from the Blood Sea. We're free, we're finally out. With the heaven-destroying halberd gone, who else in this world can suppress us? Kill them until they bleed. Blood food, a large amount of blood food, there is blood food that I need in the banished land. Countless blood shadows laughed eerily, causing the entire Blood Sea battlefield to rumble. Roar! The roar of beasts was extremely ferocious. On both sides of the Blood Sea, countless strange beasts were galloping. The excited roar sounded as if they had been imprisoned here for many years, and now they were finally free. How dare you! The Tongtian moved, and celestial light filled the sky. When such a strange movement occurred on the Blood Sea battlefield, a shadow crossed the sky, and an extremely terrifying celestial light bloomed around him. Chapter 40. Even though the heaven-destroying halberd has left, I'm still here. Don't even think about escaping. The shadow roared majestically. Runes filled the sky as he moved his palms and fingers, sealing off the broken spatial barrier and blocking the escape of the blood-red creatures. Yuanling, you're just the weapon spirit of the immortal scripture. Do you think you can trap us? Countless blood-red figures roared furiously, and terrifying killing techniques were unleashed, bombarding the spatial barrier that had just been sealed. The spatial barrier that had just been sealed was once again shattered. I'm the weapon spirit of the immortal scripture. I'll guard the ancient battlefield forever. The shadow roared again and again. Terrifying light bloomed around his body. When the light faded, the shadow transformed into the immortal scripture's original body and used it to block the broken spatial barrier again. Kakik! Yuanling, even though you've transformed into your original body to seal the spatial crack, I don't believe you can do it forever. When your primordial chi is exhausted, it'll be the time for us to leave. Countless blood shadows laughed wildly before dispersing in all directions. The countless beasts on both sides of the Blood Sea roared repeatedly, causing the entire battlefield to shake to the extreme. Yi Xian! You bastard, the heaven-destroying halberd is looking for you. These guys have come out of the seal. If the Earth Immortal realm knows about this, not only will I die, but you will also suffer a life and death calamity. The immortal scripture's original body roared again and again. Obviously, today's shocking change was caused by Yi Xian. When Yi Xian transformed into the immortal heavenly lord, the heaven-destroying halberd was connected to his mind. It was afraid that its master would be in danger, so it broke through the Blood Sea battlefield and went to find its master. The heaven-destroying halberd was the weapon that suppressed the Blood Sea battlefield. Without it, these sealed blood-red creatures would definitely escape to the outside world and cause great chaos. The shadow didn't pity the lives of the mortals in the outside world. He was afraid that this change would attract the attention of the Earth Immortal realm. If this really happened, he and Yi Xian would suffer a great calamity. In the Yi family courtyard, the bloodthirsty demon's sword buzzed incessantly. The head of martial security closed his eyes and waited for death. But at this critical moment, an anxious voice came from afar, and over 100 figures rushed towards the Yi family courtyard. "Mr. Yi, please stop." Before the Azure Dragon Man arrived, his voice had already reached Yi Xian's ears. This caused Yi Xian to frown slightly, and the bloodthirsty demon's sword also stopped at this moment. Azure Dragon, the leader of the Earth Group, had a lot of power in the Wuan department. When the Wuan secretary sent the news back to the Yi family, Azure Dragon knew that something bad was going to happen. He even brought the members of the Earth Group to the Yi family. "Mr. Yi Xian, please calm down. Today's matter is just a misunderstanding. I will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation." Azure Dragon quickly walked in front of Yi Xian and bowed to him. Such a scene caused the head of martial security to be stunned on the spot. As for the members of the black and yellow teams, they were even more puzzled. The ones who were the most shocked were none other than the Yi father and son and Xia Qingzhu. The people present were not idiots. The dignified leader of the Wuan department's Earth Group actually bowed to Yi Xian. From this, it could be seen that there was a secret that no one could imagine. "Azure Dragon, are you crazy?" The head of martial security was the first to recover from his shock. He angrily rebuked the Azure Dragon. "This person has killed over 100 people and has already violated the bottom line of our China. Could it be that you want to save him?" "That's right, Lord Azure Dragon. Although this person's cultivation is terrifying, he has already violated the great taboo of our Wuan department." There were even more members of the Wuan department who muttered softly, "Save him." Hearing the head of martial security's reprimanding words, a wry smile appeared on the Azure Dragon's face. He couldn't help but blame the head of martial security in his heart. How could he be saving Yi Xian? He was saving your life now. The Azure Dragon's expression gradually turned cold as he looked at the head of martial security and said, "Sir, Mr. Yi is a guest of our Earth Group. The reason he did this today is because our Earth Group received news that the Yi family has colluded with foreign terrorist organizations to harm the interests of our China. Mr. Ye's actions today were also ordered by our Earth Group." As the Azure Dragon's words fell, the head of martial security's eyes widened. He looked at the Azure Dragon in disbelief. As long as he wasn't a fool, he could tell that the Azure Dragon was spouting nonsense. "Azure Dragon, you actually dare to slander our Yi family?" Yi Canghai's expression changed drastically as he angrily rebuked him. "Humph." The Azure Dragon snorted disdainfully. "Whether it's slander or not, it's not up to you to decide. Others are afraid of your Yi family, but my Azure Dragon bloodline has been passed down since the founding of the country. I don't know how many storms have we gone through, but if I really find out that your Yi family has colluded with foreign terrorist organizations, no one in China can save you." The Azure Dragon's voice was resolute and decisive. He was clearly telling Yi Canghai, "So what if I slandered your Yi family?" The head of martial security seemed to have great power, and the 8 group leaders under him were his subordinates. However, this was only a relationship in name. The true leader of the 8 group members was their group leader. Every group leader had a bloodline that had been passed down since the founding of the country. The head of martial security was only a link to convey the orders of the higher-ups. "Azure Dragon, you have to give me an explanation for what happened today," the head of martial security said in a low voice. "Mr. Yi Xian is a guest of my Earth team. I will report this matter directly to the higher-ups. You don't have to worry about it," the Azure Dragon said calmly, clearly trying to protect Yi Xian. In fact, if it were anyone else, the Azure Dragon wouldn't want to fall out with the head of martial security and the Yi family. However, when the Azure Dragon found out that Yi Xian had saved the entire plane, he knew that no matter what, he had to tie Yi Xian firmly to the Earth team. Moreover, the Azure Dragon was sure that when the higher-ups received this news, their attitude towards Yi Xian would change drastically. Not to mention killing a few people from the Yi family, even if it was something that went overboard, they would only pretend that they didn't see it. Good, good, good. I didn't expect that after I stepped down from that position, even the Earth team would bully my Yi family. I will remember what happened today. Yi Canghai's face was filled with shame and anger as he turned around and walked towards the inner hall. Yi Canghao and Yi Ping looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. They didn't stay any longer and directly left the troublesome place in front of them. Mr. Yi, I'll send you back. The Azure Dragon said with a smile. A monstrous massacre turned into nothingness. Yi Xian naturally saw everything that the Azure Dragon had done. However, his expression was neither sad nor happy, but there was an inexplicable glint in his eyes. In fact, if the Azure Dragon hadn't appeared, Yi Xian would have let go of all his worries and directly turned into the immortal Heavenly Lord to kill everyone present. After that, he would also let the world know his identity as an immortal cultivator. In his heart, he already had plans to face the entire world. However, the appearance of the Azure Dragon changed the situation. Yi Xian took advantage of the situation and his killing intent also quietly disappeared. After all, his mother and sister were still at home. If his true identity was revealed to the world, his family would probably become the center of attention. This was also something that Yi Xian didn't want to see. Chapter 41. In the capital, in an unknown courtyard. A stone platform, 2 stone stools, and a pot of tea were placed on the stone platform. The Azure Dragon had a wry smile on his face, and from time to time, he would fill Yi Xian's cup with water. Behind the Azure Dragon stood many members of the Earth group, looking at Yi Xian with curiosity and reverence in their eyes. In the Yi family's courtyard, the strength that Yi Xian had displayed had already shocked the members of the Earth group. They were absolutely certain that this Lord Yi Xian had long since stepped into the legendary pre-celestial stage. Otherwise, how could he kill with his sword and create such a terrifying might? The strong were respected, even in this modern city, and the members of the Earth group all had a sense of arrogance. However, in front of Yi Xian, their arrogance was completely restrained. This was also their respect for the strong. Mr. Yi, you have done something that has shaken the capital today. The Azure Dragon laughed bitterly. Yi Xian also knew that today's matter had made things difficult for the Azure Dragon, and he was not someone who did not know what was good for him. He slowly nodded at the Azure Dragon and said, I will remember this favor in my heart. If you are in trouble in the future, you can come to Jiangnan to find me. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he returned the favor and handed an ancient book to the Azure Dragon. This is a qi nurturing technique. If you cultivate diligently, you will be able to step into the pre-celestial stage in less than half a year. He never thought that Yi Xian would actually give him such a heavy gift. This also made him stand up and bow to Yi Xian, saying, such a heavy gift, the Azure Dragon does not dare to accept, but today's matter still needs to be explained to the higher-ups. Please stay in the capital for a few days, the leaders might want to meet you. Yi Xian slowly nodded. Without needing the Azure Dragon's explanation, he understood that the upper echelons of China would definitely want to meet with him. After all, the Yi family was one of the 8 great families in the capital, and although he did not kill the father and son of the Yi family, it had caused a huge negative impact. Alright, I'll wait for your news. Yi Xian said softly. At the same time, the upper echelons of Jingdou were completely shaken. As one of the 8 great clans, the Yi family had actually been slaughtered. Furthermore, it was done by a visiting official of the Wuan Bureau's Earth team. As the leader of the Earth team, Azure Dragon did not hesitate to offend the Yi family to protect this person. He also did not give the secretary of Wuan Bureau any face. When this news spread everywhere, the entire Jingdou also strangely quieted down. The 8 great clans of the capital were deeply rooted in power. In the 3 realms of the military, politics, and business, they had great speaking rights. Although they could not be said to be of the same breadth and branch, they all understood the principle of being intimately connected. This was no longer a matter of whether the Yi clan had lost face or not, but it involved the interests of the 8 great clans. Today, the Yi clan had almost been destroyed, and it was hard to guarantee that the other clans would suffer the same fate in the future. If the upper echelons of Xia country did not handle this problem well, it would cause a huge earthquake in Xia country's military, political, and business worlds. Watching from the sidelines and waiting for the results, this was the attitude of the 8 great clans. The Yi family and the Nangong family had entered and exited the residences of the big shots of the Xia kingdom many times. However, they always walked out with furrowed brows and did not get the results they wanted. Guns were loaded and the security was tight. In a secret meeting room, the 4 big shots of Xia country sat upright. The Secretary of Military Security stood beside them, and Azure Dragon stood among them with a calm expression. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of fingers tapping on the table was constantly heard. The Grand Marshal of Xia country, Li Lingguo, had white hair and a beard. Although he was already 70 years old, he gave people a sense of dignity without being angry. Secretary Lin, are you telling the truth? Li Lingguo frowned slightly, and his expression was very unpleasant. Marshal, what this subordinate said is true. This Yi Xian might have already stepped into the Xiantian realm and relied on his cultivation to run amok. He even slaughtered over 100 people in the Yi family. The head of martial security said with certainty. Khanate stage? Li Lingguo sighed and said, how rare. This old man has entered the Khanate stage. Although it has been more than 10 years, at his age, I am only at the transforming strength stage. Old Li, you can't say that. Although this person has entered the Khanate stage, he completely ignores the law. If he doesn't give the Yi clan an explanation, I'm afraid the 8 great clans will not let this matter rest. Prime Minister Zhang was in charge of Xia country's government affairs, so he knew how deep the water was. If it was not handled well, it would cause a great shock to Xia country. Humph. These damn national parasites should have been eliminated long ago. Look at the current military, political, and business world. Who doesn't have people from the 8 great clans? If this goes on, I'm afraid the peace and prosperity of Xia country will be nibbled away by these clans sooner or later. Xia Taizhan, the Minister of War, said bitterly and continued, I don't think Yi Xian did anything. It's a good opportunity to kill these people's spirit and let them know that Xia country belongs to the people, not a place where they can do whatever they want. Old Xia, although you say that, you should know that a slight move in one part will affect the whole situation, Prime Minister Zhang said in a low voice. Old Zhang, what do you mean? Marshal Li Lingguo frowned and asked. If we don't want to cause a shock to Xia country, we must punish Yi Xian. Prime Minister Zhang immediately made a decision. As Prime Minister Zhang finished speaking, Li Lingguo and Xia Tieshan's faces darkened. It was obvious that this decision was not what they wanted. As the Grand Marshal of Xia country, Li Lingguo was a person who cherished talents. If he really made a move on Yi Xian, wouldn't Xia country lose a Khanate stage martial artist? It had been decades since Xia country had seen a Khanate stage martial artist. Every appearance of a Khanate stage martial artist was Xia country's most precious treasure. I don't agree, Li Lingguo refuted directly. This Yi Xian suits this old man's taste. I don't agree either. Xia Taizhan sneered. You 2 old fogies, other than praising the so-called martial arts, what do you know? This is not a simple matter, but a major matter that involves the stability of the country. Although Prime Minister Zhang was a scholar, he naturally had to make the right decision when it came to the national interests. Bang! Xia Taizhan slammed the table and stood up. He rubbed his fists and said unhappily, Old Zhang, are you trying to quarrel? Old Xia, why aren't you sitting down? Do you want to fight with Old Zhang? Although Li Lingguo did not agree with Prime Minister Zhang's actions, he also understood that Prime Minister Zhang's decision was in consideration of Xia country's overall interests. For a moment, the atmosphere in the meeting room became intense. The Secretary of Wuan did not dare to interrupt. Azure Dragon's expression was calm and he did not make a sound. All right, stop quarreling. Suddenly, an old man sitting at the head of the meeting room spoke in a low voice. As his voice fell, the meeting room suddenly fell silent. If there were outsiders present at this time, they would be shocked to find that this old man appeared on television almost every day because he was Xia country's highest decision maker. Sir, what do you mean? Prime Minister Zhang glared at Xia Taizhan and then looked at the number 1 sir. Chapter 42. At this time, Li Lingguo and Zhang Taizhan also looked at the First Minister. Obviously, the final decision was also in his hands. Azure Dragon, give me an explanation. Why did you stop the Secretary of Military Security from arresting him? The First Minister had a kind face. When he spoke, it was like the spring wind and rain, but it also gave people a sense of dignity. This kind of temperament could only be seen on him in the entire Xia. Azure Dragon first bowed to the several big shots of the Xia, and then said unhurriedly, "Greetings, ministers. What I want to say is a big secret. Except for the few of you, I don't want anyone else to know this secret. Secretary Lin, you can leave first." Li Lingguo directly ordered. "Yes, Marshal." The Secretary of Military Security looked embarrassed. He glared at Azure Dragon and turned to walk out of the meeting room. "Well, there's no one else here. You can speak." Prime Minister Zhang said in a low voice and continued, "But I want to tell you that if you don't give us a satisfactory explanation, you will be punished for releasing Yi Xian without permission." Looking at the serious faces of the leaders, Azure Dragon smiled and said, "I wonder if the leaders still remember the hijacking incident some time ago." Ha! As Azure Dragon's words fell, the faces of the leaders froze. Their eyes were filled with shock as they looked at Azure Dragon. What does the hijacking incident have to do with Yi Xian? "Don't, wait." Prime Minister Zhang angrily rebuked, but before he could finish, the First Minister interrupted him and walked quickly to Azure Dragon. A wisp of light appeared in his eyes as he said, "Do you mean that the person who saved the entire plane was Yi Xian? Old Minister is wise. That's indeed the case." Azure Dragon smiled and complimented him at the right time. Then, he fell silent. How is this possible?" Prime Minister Zhang exclaimed. He was completely confused. "Azure Dragon, what evidence do you have?" Li Lingguo suddenly burst out with the aura of a Xiantian warrior, which proved that he was not calm at the moment. Although the Minister of War, Xia Taizhan, did not say anything, he stared at Azure Dragon, trying to see if he was lying. Looking at the shocked expressions of the few people, Qing Long seemed to have expected this. He leisurely said, "Senior leaders, you are wise. Yi Xian took this plane to the capital. Moreover, when the plane was hijacked, it was this person who killed the terrorists." At this point, Azure Dragon paused for a moment and continued, "If we're talking about evidence, the flight attendants on the plane should be able to serve as witnesses. His identity information is on the register. During this period, I even spoke to him personally. Moreover, when the plane crashed, this Mr. Yi disappeared. However, he appeared in capital city that day." Hearing Azure Dragon's words, the leaders fell completely silent. They already believed him a little. If Azure Dragon was lying, he would definitely not be able to bear the responsibility. "Azure Dragon, you've done well." The first chief spoke first and patted Azure Dragon's shoulder approvingly. "Azure Dragon, this matter is extremely confidential and must not be leaked. Arrange a time for us old men to meet with him." Li Lingguo said excitedly. "That's right. If he is that extraordinary person, we must have a talk with him." Prime Minister Zhang's tone changed. Clearly, Yi Xian's weight in his heart was not something the 8 major families could compare to. "Haha, good. Azure Dragon, you've done well. I think the position of Secretary of Military Security should be changed." Xia Taizhan laughed loudly. The more he looked at Azure Dragon, the more satisfied he was. "Alright, don't joke with me. If I, Azure Dragon, really take the position of Division Head of Group 8, I'm afraid the entire Martial Security Department will fall into chaos." Azure Dragon hurriedly refused. Xia Taizhan was only joking. He also knew that the 8 major team leaders were not convinced. The current position of secretary was just an empty shell. If Azure Dragon really took the position, the other 7 would definitely turn the sky upside down. "Alright, enough chit-chat. Hurry up and arrange this matter. This is the most important thing. The first chief directly issued an order. This subordinate obeys. Azure Dragon finally breathed a sigh of relief and left with the order. Capital City, a secret courtyard house. 2 ordinary cars cleared the road ahead. Several men in black alighted first and looked around vigilantly. After confirming that there was no danger, they picked up the walkie-talkie and said something. Not long after, a black car drove from the end of the road and stopped in front of the courtyard. 4 old men in trench coats quickly entered the courtyard under the protection of several men in black. Greetings, Chief. Azure Dragon gave a military salute. Azure Dragon, stop with the formalities. Where's little Yi? Xia Taizhan scolded jokingly. Yi Xian greets the chiefs. I'm ashamed to have the chiefs come in person. Unknowingly, Yi Xian appeared in front of the 4 chiefs out of thin air. This caused the 4 of them to be stunned. They were slightly surprised by the strange way Yi Xian appeared. However, the 4 leaders were all people who had experienced great storms, so they naturally didn't show any signs of shock. Li Lingguo, on the other hand, had a smile on his face as he strode forward and patted Yi Xian's shoulder. He laughed loudly and said, "Good kid, you really are from China. Do you know how long this old man has been looking for you?" Yi Xian could completely feel Li Lingguo's warm attitude towards him. Although Yi Xian was an immortal cultivator, he was still a citizen of Xia. Furthermore, this land gave birth to him. He deeply knew that the elders in front of him had worked hard for Xia for decades. They could be called great people of this generation. Yi Xian did not lack the respect that he deserved. This had nothing to do with his identity as an immortal cultivator, but rather the selfless contributions of the older generation that allowed for the current prosperity of Xia. This kind of respect was also an emotion that burst out from the bottom of Yi Xian's heart. "You old fellow, I know what you're planning. Don't even think about pulling little Yi into your military." Xia Taizhan laughed and scolded. He directly walked in front of Yi Xian and smiled kindly, "Little Yi, if there's anything in the future, just tell your uncle Xia. If that old thing Yi Songhai dares to cause trouble for you, just tell me and see how this old man will deal with him." "Alright, we came here in secret today to talk to little Yi about serious matters. Don't mess around anymore." The first chief smiled and made Yi Xian cup his hands in greeting. At this moment, the Azure Dragon left the place, leaving only the 4 chiefs and Yi Xian in the courtyard. As the leader of the Earth group, the Azure Dragon knew very well that there were some secrets that he could not listen to. On a stone platform and 5 stone stools, the highest-ranking figures of China and Yi Xian sat together. "Lil Yi, we already know about your matter. I thank you on behalf of the people of China for the hijacking," the first chief said sincerely. "But, can you tell us, old men, what kind of existence are you?" The number 1 chief went straight to the point and asked the biggest question in the minds of the people present. Looking at the eager gazes of the elders, Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, not knowing if he should reveal his identity. During this time, the entire courtyard was extremely silent. 10 minutes later, the hesitation in Yi Xian's eyes disappeared, and his low voice also fell into the ears of the elders. "I am an immortal cultivator." Chapter 43. The sun set in the west and night fell. When the first ray of moonlight shone down, the 4 big shots of China had already been in the courtyard for a full 10 hours. Azure Dragon was smoking outside the door with an anxious look on his face. He never thought that the first conversation between the 4 big shots and Yi Xian would take so long. The Azure Dragon's heart was filled with curiosity. He really wanted to go in and see what kind of magic Yi Xian had that could make the 4 leaders, who were so busy every day, waste so much time here. Creak. The door to the courtyard house was pushed open. The 4 big shots of China and Yi Xian walked out together. Azure Dragon quickly put out the cigarette in his hand and walked towards the 4 chiefs. "Little Yi, you don't have to send me off. When you come to the capital in the future, you must come to my house. Your aunt is proficient in the 8 major cuisines. If she knows that you are coming, she will definitely welcome you. That's right. Come to the capital often to see us old fellows. If anything happens in the future, let Azure Dragon know. If he doesn't do well, give us a call and see how we deal with him. Seeing the four chiefs being so friendly to Yi Xian, Azure Dragon's eyeballs almost fell out. He knew the personalities of the chiefs very well. Their every word and action represented China. They were extremely harsh even to their own children. However, the scene in front of him made Azure Dragon feel as if he had fallen into a dream. He could not believe what he was seeing. If Yi Xian comes to the capital again, he will definitely pay a visit. Yi Xian said with a smile. All right, all right, all right. Little Yi, you don't have to send us off. If we don't go back now, we will attract the attention of some people. I'm afraid we will cause trouble for Little Yi again. Azure Dragon opened the car door and the four big shots of China entered the car. He then sat in the front passenger seat. As the car started, it gradually disappeared at the end of the road. In the car, the four big shots were glowing. Although they did not say anything, Azure Dragon, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, could feel that they were in a very good mood. This was something he had not seen in many years. Chief, about the Yi family. Azure Dragon carefully probed. Humph. At the mention of the Yi clan, the faces of the chiefs changed. Li Lingguo even snorted coldly and said, a small Yi clan doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I'd like to see if the 8 great clans can overturn the heavens. Old Li, I'll leave this matter to you. If they don't know when to stop, then there's no need to show them any mercy. The first chief's face was calm, but his words were full of dignity. It's time to knock some sense into them. Prime Minister Zhang's voice was unfathomable. It was clear that several big shots had already made a decision. Azure Dragon's eyes were filled with great astonishment as he listened to the big shots' words. Clearly, these big shots were going to lay their hands on the 8 great clans, and all of this was because of Yi Xian. This guy, what did he do? Azure Dragon muttered to himself in shock. Wind and clouds gathered as they watched coldly from the sidelines. While the 8 great clans were waiting for the leaders to make a decision, a series of thunderstorms suddenly struck the 8 great clans. Overnight, there was a huge earthquake in the military, political, and business world. Countless people were taken away by the Martial Security Bureau, and many more were thrown into jail. Their businesses were seized, and they were dismissed for investigation. The series of thunderous blows made the 8 great clans panic. They even went to the big shots' residences overnight, wanting to find out what had happened. Unfortunately, they were directly kicked out of the house, and a large number of troops surrounded the residences of the 8 great clans. This immediately caused them to fall into a panic. The 8 great clans were deeply rooted. Although the big shots used thunderous means to knock them down, they did not go overboard. Rome wasn't built in a single day. The big shots understood this very well. If they wanted to completely disintegrate the 8 great clans, they could only do it slowly. However, after this series of actions, the 8 great clans became much more well-behaved. They finally understood that the big shots were taking action against their clans because of Yi Xian. When this news spread throughout the 8 great clans, everyone was stunned. They could not figure out who exactly Yi Xian was. The big shots of Xia Nation actually didn't hesitate to take action against them to support Yi Xian. The 8 great clans were not stupid. Although they were powerful, they had no choice but to retreat temporarily in the face of the big shots. They even ordered the disciples of the clans not to offend Yi Xian if they met him in the future. The storm caused by Yi Xian also came to an end quietly after the big shots cleaned it up. However, the 8 great clans remembered Yi Xian's name deeply in their minds. In the Yi family compound, Yi Canghai and his son looked worried while Yi Ping stood at the side. There were many disciples of the Yi family gathered there, but all of them looked sullen. Ping, this brother of yours is really not simple. Yi Canghai smiled bitterly with great regret in his eyes. I didn't expect this unfilial son to have such great power. Even the leaders are backing him, Yi Canghao said with a complicated expression. Canghao, he's your son after all. There's no obstacle between father and son. Why don't you? Yi Canghai hesitated. Father, I know what you mean, but even if I put down my pride and beg him to return to the Yi family, this unfilial son will definitely ignore me given his character. Besides, you've also seen it. This unfilial son not only killed second brother and his son, but he also killed Nangong Yun. Even if you don't care about these two matters, what about the Nangong family? Yi Canghao said clearly. Ah! Yi Canghai sighed, as if he had aged 10 years at this moment. I'm old and can't support this family anymore. Your eldest brother is away all year round and has no intention of being the head of the family. You've always been fighting with second brother for the position of the head of the family. Now that your second brother is gone, I'll fulfill your wish. From today onwards, you'll be the head of the Yi family. Yi Canghai remained silent for a long time before saying those words, which also made Yi Canghao stunned. There was a look of joy in his eyes, but it soon dimmed again. Yi Canghao knew very well that if it were any other time, he wouldn't be the head of the family. However, after experiencing the incident with Yi Xian, he could also tell that Yi Xian had the support of several leaders and even offended the 8 major families. Hence, the Yi family would have a hard time in the future. As Yi Xian's biological father, he might be able to ease the relationship with Yi Xian if he took the position of the head of the family. At this moment, Yi Ping's expression was stiff and there was no light in his eyes. His heart was fluctuating violently and he thought of Yi Xian's cold and menacing gaze before he left. Could it be that I really made the wrong choice? Yi Ping muttered to himself. In the Xia family home. Xia Qingzhu was wearing pajamas and sitting cross-legged on the large bed. Her eyes were filled with confusion as she stared blankly at the moonlight outside the window. From time to time, Yi Xian's face would appear in her mind. Yi Xian, you, who exactly are you? Xia Qingzhu muttered to herself with great bitterness in her eyes. In the Nangong family. Bang! The sound of jade breaking filled the air and the head of the Nangong family's face turned red. His sinister expression was extremely terrifying and the people of the Nangong family dared not breathe too loudly. Yi Xian, you killed my beloved daughter. This feud is irreconcilable. The head of the Nangong family paced back and forth while emitting a cold aura. Clearly, he was extremely furious. Even if you're a Khanate realm warrior and have a few big shots protecting you, the Nangong family will definitely make you pay the price even if we have to use up all our 100 years of heritage. That night, the 8 major families were in an uproar. However, they didn't know that Yi Xian had never really taken them seriously. Besides, the chaos that would happen in the future would make them understand what a terrifying existence Yi Xian was. Chapter 44. Yi Xian looked at the sky without saying a word and remained calm when he heard the earth moving. That was the state that Yi Xian was in at the moment. A lone moon hung in the sky. Yi Xian stood alone in the courtyard with his hands behind his back. A wisp of moonlight shone down, making him look like an immortal under the moon. Today, during the face-to-face meeting with the 4 big shots, Yi Xian revealed his identity as an immortal cultivator and even displayed some means that shocked the big shots. In fact, Yi Xian didn't want to reveal his identity. He just wanted to take care of his family in peace for the rest of his life. After 100 years, he would also leave this world to pursue what he wanted. However, in the boundless secular world, some things were unavoidable. The world operated according to its own rules. Even though he was an immortal cultivator who had transcended mortals and had the means to destroy countries and cities, there were some things that couldn't be solved by violence. It was easy to destroy, but difficult to create. If he recklessly used terrifying means, he would definitely cause chaos in this world. By then, the country would no longer be a country and his family would no longer be home. Even if his family had his protection, the peace he wanted would no longer exist. Besides, talking to the big shots face-to-face would save him a lot of trouble in the future. That was the best way to solve the problem. Yi Xian stood alone under the moon, feeling a little vexed. He came to Beijing with the intention of bringing his younger brother home, but things went in the opposite direction. Not only did he fail to bring his younger brother home, but they also broke off all ties. When Yi Xian saw Yi Ping's yearning for glory and wealth, he was extremely disappointed. However, what really annoyed him was that if his mother and Ling Er found out about this news, they would definitely be very sad. Yuan Ling, maybe you're right. Being in the boundless secular world, one should suffer from the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Yi Xian laughed self-deprecatingly. At this moment, he was also feeling a little tired. Ding ring ring. The sound of a mobile phone ringing directly made Yi Xian come back to his senses. When he took out his mobile phone, a string of unfamiliar numbers appeared in front of him. Ha! Yi Xian frowned slightly. He had only given his phone number to his family and the Azure Dragon. After coming to the capital, he had only exchanged numbers with a few big shots of the Xia Kingdom. However, the numbers on his phone were not from these people, but from the Jiangnan area. Hello. Yi Xian picked up the phone and spoke in a low voice. Hello, are you Yi Ling Er's brother? A female voice came from the other end of the phone. Who are you? Yi Xian frowned. I am Yi Ling Er's homeroom teacher, Teacher Li. Please come to school as soon as possible tomorrow. A slightly dissatisfied voice came from the other side of the phone. Knowing the identity of the person on the other end of the phone, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and said softly, Hello, Teacher Li. What happened to my sister? What happened? Teacher Li's tone changed as she said, I really don't know how you educate your children. Yi Ling Er injured a classmate in school. I asked for her mother's number, but she refused to tell me. In the end, she gave me your number. Please come to school tomorrow to deal with this problem. Is my sister with you? Yi Xian asked calmly. Brother. A weak voice came from the other end of the phone. Ling Er, are you hurt? Yi Xian asked softly. No. I'm not hurt. Yi Ling Er hesitated. Go home first. I'll come to school tomorrow to see you. Give the phone to the teacher. Just as Yi Xian finished speaking, the voice of Yi Ling Er's homeroom teacher came from the other end of the phone. I say, what's wrong with you parents? This child's education is a big problem. I hope you can take it seriously. I'll wait for you in the office tomorrow. Without waiting for Yi Xian to speak, the other end of the phone had already hung up. Yi Xian's face was expressionless. When children fight in school, it's just a matter of paying medical fees, apologizing to each other, and going home to educate them. Yi Xian didn't take it seriously. Yi Xian casually called Azure Dragon and told him that he would be leaving the capital tonight. Unless there was something big that couldn't be solved, don't go to Jiangnan to find him. Everything was done. Yi Xian had the intention to leave. When he took a step out, the void hummed and he disappeared from the courtyard house. Jiangnan City, Sky Blue Academy. The sky was blue and the sun was shining. It was school time. Some young boys and girls were talking and laughing as they walked through the school gate. It gave people a youthful atmosphere. After rushing through the night, Yi Xian rushed back to Jiangnan from the capital. He didn't go straight home. Instead, he went to Sky Blue Academy to solve the matter of his little sister's fight. Stepping into the school gate, Yi Xian found out the location of Yi Ling Er's homeroom teacher after asking around. He went straight to her office. The homeroom teacher's office. It was the morning self-study time for the students. Many teachers were in the office preparing for class. However, this scene made more than 10 teachers look on coldly and secretly discuss something from time to time. Li Hongyan, looking at her appearance, seemed to be in her 30s. She was at the age where she was mature and charming. She was like a ripe peach that made people want to take a bite out of her. Although she was dressed appropriately, she had a seductive aura. She was also Yi Ling Er's class teacher. Ms. Li, how can such a wild girl come to Sky Blue Academy? Look at how she hit my child. Her eyes are already bruised. A middle-aged man with a face full of anger was sitting opposite Li Hongyan. He was dressed luxuriously, especially the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist. He deliberately showed it from time to time as if to show off his identity. Beside the middle-aged man was a girl with a proud face. Her eyes were only slightly bruised. At this moment, she was looking at Yi Ling, who was punished to stand in the corner. Her eyes were full of disdain. At this moment, Yi Ling's hair had already been dyed back to black. Her clothes were also slightly plain. She was punished to stand in the corner by Li Hongyan. However, her beautiful face was full of scratches, and a few of them were extremely obvious. "Director Sun, don't be angry. I have already informed Yi Ling's parents. They will definitely give you a satisfactory explanation." Li Hongyan quickly comforted the middle-aged man. I have already asked around. This wild girl can enter Sky Blue Academy to study only because she paid a little more school transfer fee. Children from nouveau riche families like this are lacking in education. The middle-aged man's voice was loud, and he slammed the table from time to time. This made Li Hongyan's expression extremely awkward. Her heart was filled with resentment towards Yi Ling. Don't worry. When Yi Ling's parents come, I will definitely educate her family well. Li Hongyan vowed solemnly. Ta, ta, ta. Just as Li Hongyan's voice fell, a series of footsteps came from outside the door. Yi Xian walked into the office with a gloomy face. Obviously, the conversation between the two had all fallen into his ears. "Brother." Looking at Yi Xian's appearance, Yi Ling bit her lips and quickly walked to the front of Yi Xian. Her eyes were filled with great grievance. At this moment, Yi Xian caressed his little sister's face that was full of scars. His face was expressionless. He only nodded slightly and then walked towards Li Hongyan and Li Hongyan. "Hello, Teacher Li. I am Yi Ling's brother. I wonder how you would like to deal with this matter." Yi Xian sat directly opposite Li Hongyan. His expression was very calm, and no one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 45. As a teacher of Sky Blue Academy, Li Hongyan's parents usually had to be polite to her. Because of the fight between the two children, Director Sun had slammed the table and glared at her, which made her feel resentful. Now that she saw that Yi Xian didn't even have the intention to apologize, the anger that she had been suppressing for a long time finally exploded. "How should we deal with this?" Li Hongyan's face was cold as she directly scolded Yi Xian. "Yi Ling fought in school. You parents have a lot of responsibility. This incident will be recorded as a major demerit. If something like this happens again, you will be expelled from school immediately." Hearing Li Hongyan's way of dealing with the matter, Sun Wanxiang wasn't very satisfied, but he didn't say anything. He only looked at Yi Xian from the corner of his eyes and said, "I don't lack medical fees, but your sister must apologize to my daughter." At this moment, in the huge office, many teachers looked over. Facing Li Hongyan and Sun Wanxiang's aggressive attitude, they didn't say anything even though they were a little unhappy. Looking at the two's fearless attitude, Yi Xian seemed very calm. He slowly got up and went directly to Yi Ling and said, "Ling, between you and this student, who started the fight first?" Looking at Yi Xian's calm expression, Yi Ling said weakly, "She hit me first, then I fought back." Looking at the brother and sister's question and answer, Li Hongyan was stunned. Then, she said righteously, "It's her fault for hitting you, but it's your fault for hitting her back." Li Hongyan's words didn't seem to be wrong, and the other teachers nodded. Obviously, fights between students happened from time to time. It was just like the example that people often used, if a dog bites you, can you bite it back? The school's educational attitude was to let students learn how to comfort and not make things difficult for people who weren't worth it. This was the essence of a student. Hearing Li Hongyan's righteous words, Yi Ling bit her lips. She wanted to refute, but when the words came to her mouth, she didn't know what to say. There was only a great grievance in her eyes. Suddenly, she turned around. Yi Xian strolled towards Li Hongyan, and the next scene completely stunned everyone in the office. Pa! Yi Xian ruthlessly slapped Li Hongyan across the face, causing her to stagger. The red handprint on her face was extremely obvious. Silence, extreme silence. Li Hongyan was stunned by Yi Xian's attack. She only recovered after a few breaths of time. Her face was filled with extreme shame and anger. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws as she pounced towards Yi Xian. Pa! Yi Xian slapped Li Hongyan again. This time, Li Hongyan was sent flying. Several of her teeth fell out of her mouth, and her charming body smashed onto the desk. It's my fault for hitting you, but why did you fight back? Yi Xian asked softly. At this moment, Li Hongyan's cheeks were bruised and her hair was messy. She was stunned by Yi Xian's direct question. Her eyes were filled with resentment, but she didn't know how to answer Yi Xian's question. The surrounding teachers looked even more complicated. It was obvious that Yi Xian's actions were extremely violent, but they couldn't find any fault with it. A parent hitting a teacher. This is going against the heavens. How does your Sky Blue Academy educate people with such a student and a parent? Although Sun Wanxiang was surprised by Yi Xian's actions, he was here today to avenge his daughter. This made his gaze towards Yi Xian become even more unfriendly. Mr. Sun, you're this student's father, right? Yi Xian pulled a chair and sat directly across from Sun Wanxiang. Yi Xian didn't look at a teacher like Li Hongyan anymore. Yi Xian silently went behind Yi Xian, her eyes filled with complicated emotions. Humph, don't think that I'm afraid of you just because you're a martial artist, Sun Wanxiang said disdainfully. My sister is wrong for hitting your daughter. I'm here to apologize on her behalf. Yi Xian's attitude stunned Sun Wanxiang. He thought that Yi Xian wanted to use force to intimidate him, but he didn't expect Yi Xian to apologize to him. This made Sun Wanxiang mistakenly think that Yi Xian knew his identity and was about to give in. Humph, if an apology can solve this, what's the use of an arrestor from the Hanging Mirror Department? Sun Wanxiang didn't back down. How about this? Your daughter is injured. I can pay you any medical fees you need, Yi Xian said expressionlessly. Medical fees? Sun Wanxiang was stunned. Although he didn't lack money, the more money he had, the better. This made him look at Yi Xian carefully, and then he sneered, Sun Wanxiang, have a daughter from a rich family. The medical fees will be at least 1 million. As Sun Wanxiang's words fell, the teachers in the entire office burst into an uproar. They looked at Yi Xian's humble attitude with contempt. Sure. Yi Xian didn't waste time. He took out a gold card and handed it to Sun Wanxiang. There's 1 million in this card. Take it as this student's medical fees. The password is the last 6 digits of the card. Looking at Yi Xian's actions, Yi Ling-er said anxiously, Brother, you can't give it to him. Ling-er, don't mess around, Yi Xian said calmly. Taking the gold card from Yi Xian's hand, Sun Wanxiang didn't expect that the young man in front of him would really pay him 1 million. This put him in a good mood. He stood up from his seat and said, Seeing that you have a good attitude, I'll let this matter go. Sun Wanxiang was about to walk out the door with his daughter, but before he could take a few steps, Yi Xian's calm voice rang out. We've apologized and paid the medical fees. Shouldn't we talk about my sister's injury? Sun Wanxiang's expression changed. He suddenly turned around and looked at Yi Xian. His voice was gloomy. Kid, don't be ungrateful. There are some people you can't afford to offend. There's no one in this world that I can't afford to offend. The matter hasn't been settled yet. Do you think you can leave? Yi Xian's expression slowly darkened. Ha! Seeing Yi Xian's change in attitude, Sun Wanxiang's heart skipped a beat. He had a bad feeling about this. Then what do you want? Sun Wanxiang said sinisterly. I'm a very reasonable person. My sister's face is covered in scratches. I want you and your daughter to apologize to her and pay for her medical fees, Yi Xian said coldly. Apologize? Medical fees? How much do you want? At some point, a few bodyguards had entered the office and stood behind Sun Wanxiang. They looked at Yi Xian with a sinister smile. 1 billion Chinese dollars. And you have to apologize to my sister in front of the entire school. Yi Xian ignored the bodyguards beside Sun Wanxiang. His voice became colder. Kid, I think you're courting death. Cripple him. Sun Wanxiang said viciously. He directly had the bodyguards beside him walk towards Yi Xian with a sinister smile. As for the teachers in the office, their faces turned pale. They all retreated, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire. Chapter 46. The homeroom teacher's office was in complete chaos. A few female teachers quickly called the police and reported the incident to the principal of Sky Blue Academy. Meanwhile, a few bodyguards had already arrived in front of Yi Xian aggressively. Obviously, they were going to beat up Yi Xian in the next moment. Stop! Suddenly, a gentle voice came from outside the door. Yun Mengyao was holding a textbook in her hand as she quickly walked into the office. Her beautiful face was not looking good. Sun Wanxiang, what are you doing? Yun Mengyao's appearance startled Sun Wanxiang. He quickly dismissed the bodyguards and came in front of Yun Mengyao with a flattering smile. Miss Yun, it's actually nothing serious. It's just that this kid was being unreasonable. I just wanted to teach him a lesson. Sun Wanxiang, I'm warning you. This is Sky Blue Academy. It's not a place where you can do whatever you want. Yun Mengyao's face was filled with disgust as she reprimanded him directly. Yes, yes, yes. You're right. I'll leave now. In front of Yun Mengyao, Sun Wanxiang immediately lowered his head and apologized profusely. He then turned to look at Yi Xian and said, Kid, I'll let you off today because of Miss Yun. I hope you know what's good for you. Let's go. Sun Wanxiang called the bodyguards and was about to leave the place. However, before he could take a few steps, a huge force suddenly exerted on his body, causing him to kneel down abruptly. Bang! The floor made a dull sound as both of his knees broke. A miserable howl came from Sun Wanxiang's mouth. Unknowingly, Yi Xian also appeared in front of him. Did I allow you to leave? Yi Xian said coldly. Such a shocking change startled Yun Mengyao. She quickly looked at Yi Xian. When she saw Yi Xian's face, she was even more shocked. It's you. Yun Mengyao deeply remembered Yi Xian's appearance. That day at Sky Blue Academy, it was this man in front of her who completely ignored her existence and fiercely taught her students a lesson. Unfortunately, Yi Xian directly ignored Yun Mengyao. His face was cold as he grabbed Sun Wanxiang's hair and lifted him up. Ah! The excruciating pain from his scalp made Sun Wanxiang howl in pain. He kept struggling in Yi Xian's hands, but he couldn't break free from Yi Xian's grasp. 1 billion xia currency, not a single cent less. If you can't take it out, then leave your life here today. Yi Xian seemed to be talking about something very casual, but in the ears of everyone present, it sent a chill down their spines. They could almost feel that Yi Xian wasn't just joking. He really wanted to take Sun Wanxiang's life. You bastards, why aren't you saving me? Sun Wanxiang cursed out loud, which made the bodyguards come back to their senses in an instant. They rushed toward Yi Xian even more fiercely. Bang bang bang. Before the crowd could see what had happened, several bodyguards were sent flying. Blood spurted out of their mouths, and several of their ribs were broken. They fainted on the ground. Ah! Such a scene directly caused many female teachers to scream, and also caused the entire office to be in chaos. Bang! Yi Xian lifted Sun Wanxiang up and pressed half of his body onto the office table. He picked up the fruit knife on the table and stabbed it into the table. I'm a very reasonable person. If you don't have money, it's fine. 1 finger for $1 million. Together with the various parts on your body, You should be able to compensate me with 1 billion, Yi Xian said softly. You bastard, kill Lao Tzu if you can. Sun Wanxiang roared. Although he was afraid, he didn't believe that Yi Xian would dare to take his life. Hearing Sun Wanxiang's words, Yi Xian's lips curled into a cruel smile. When he opened and closed his eyes, a cold glint flashed in them. What happened next made everyone in the office fall silent. Poochie. Yi Xian raised his hand and chopped off a finger. He pulled out the fruit knife from the table and chopped off Sun Wanxiang's little finger. Large amounts of blood dyed the entire table red. Ah! My hand, my hand! The 5 fingers were connected to the heart. Having one of his fingers chopped off by Yi Xian, Sun Wanxiang's entire body was drenched in cold sweat. He screamed in pain like a pig being slaughtered. Dad! Sun Wanxiang's daughter cried and ran directly toward Yi Xian. However, before the girl could reach him, Yi Xian gave the girl a cold stare. She immediately stopped and looked at Yi Xian with an extremely fearful expression. Student, please remember a principle. Even if you have great power and wealth, everyone has to be responsible for their own actions. Yi Xian seemed to have turned into an educator and was teaching Sun Wanxiang's daughter. However, in the girl's eyes, Yi Xian was an extremely terrifying demon. Yi Xian didn't look at the girl anymore. He picked up the fruit knife again and placed it on Sun Wanxiang's palm. His cold voice sounded again. That finger was worth 1 million. You still need 999 million to reach the 1 billion you owe me. I don't have that much money. Please, Poochie. Ah! The knife flashed and the index finger fell. Before Sun Wanxiang could beg, Yi Xian chopped off another finger. This caused him to be in so much pain that he couldn't speak. Stop right now. Yun Mengyao finally came to her senses. She wasn't afraid that Yi Xian would do anything to harm her. She quickly walked in front of Yi Xian and tried to snatch the fruit knife from his hand. You lunatic, how can you be so cruel? Yun Mingyao's eyes were red and there were signs that she was about to cry. She grabbed Yi Xian's hand tightly and scolded him. Ever since she was young, Yun Mengyao not only had a gentle and peerless appearance, she was also extremely kind. She had never seen such a cruel thing. This was something that she couldn't accept. At this moment, looking at Yun Mingyao's hand that was holding the knife, Yi Xian frowned. He immediately let go of the fruit knife and let Yun Mengyao take it. Sorry, I forgot. This fruit knife belongs to the school. Yi Xian said apologetically. But before Yun Mengyao could react, the following scene stunned her once again. Tears of grievance and resentment flowed from her eyes. Kacha! Ah! Yi Xian directly broke Sun Wanxiang's middle finger with his own hands, causing Sun Wanxiang to howl in pain once again. His deformed finger proved just how much pain Sun Wanxiang was in. Bang! Suddenly, Sun Wanxiang's daughter's face was full of tears. She quickly came to Yi Ling and knelt in front of Yi Ling. She cried loudly, Ling. Ling I was wrong. Please. Tell your brother not to hurt my father anymore. You. Get up. Yi Ling had been in a daze. She didn't wake up until the girl knelt in front of her. She quickly helped her up. Brother, let it go. Yi Ling pleaded to Yi Xian with a trembling voice. Looking at the crying girl, Yi Xian slowly nodded and let go of Sun Wanxiang. He said, This is just a lesson for you. Don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have money. This world is very big. You are lucky to have met me today. If it were someone else, they might have taken your life. After Yi Xian finished speaking, he didn't look at Sun Wanxiang and his daughter anymore. He directly pulled Yi Ling out of the office. You bastard, stop right there. A choked reprimand was heard. Yun Mingyao's face was full of tears. She quickly ran to Yi Xian and opened her arms to stop him. Chapter 47. Looking at Yun Mengyao who was standing in front of him, Yi Xian furrowed his brows and said, "What do you want? You bastard, don't even think about leaving after you beat someone up." Yun Mengyao clenched her teeth as tears of grievance flowed out of her eyes. She didn't know why she had to stop Yi Xian. It was as if she was filled with resentment towards Yi Xian and found a reason to block Yi Xian's path. Looking at the beautiful Yun Mengyao in front of him, Yi Xian slowly shook his head and said, "First of all, you have to understand that this matter has nothing to do with you. In fact, both sides are responsible for a fight between two children. Your teacher only needs to reprimand them, but your teacher's way of handling the matter is obviously biased towards one side. Since that's the case, I naturally have to use my own way to resolve this matter. So your way is violence?" Yun Mengyao bit her lips and stood in front of the door. It looked like she wasn't going to give way no matter what. At this moment, Yun Mengyao was extremely agitated. Yi Xian was also puzzled. Was this girl crazy? Why did she have to make things difficult for him? No. You might have misunderstood. I am a reasonable person. His daughter was injured and he needed 1 million yuan as compensation. I gave him that amount. However, in my heart, my sister is priceless. Asking him to compensate her with 1 billion yuan and cutting off 3 of his fingers is already a very light punishment. Moreover, what does this matter have to do with you? Yi Xian said with dissatisfaction. Yun Mengyao didn't know how to refute Yi Xian's twisted logic. This made her so angry that her face turned red. She angrily rebuked, "I don't care. I just won't allow you to leave." Nonsense. Yi Xian was not a kind man. He didn't have the so-called tenderness for the fairer sex. How could he have the time to tangle with Yun Mengyao? Under the astonished gazes of the crowd, Yi Xian stretched out his hand and pushed Yun Mengyao away. Yun Mengyao staggered and fell to the ground, letting out a muffled groan. Yi Xian pulled Yi Ling toward the door, but before he could take more than a few steps, Yi Ling's expression was complicated. She turned around and went to Yun Mengyao's side, helping her up. "Teacher Yun, don't blame my brother. His personality is like this. I apologize to you on his behalf," Yi Ling said apologetically. "This person is really violent. He even hit a goddess like Teacher Yun. Shoo, keep your voice down. If he hears you, you'll be in trouble." Although everyone was afraid of Yi Xian, they still began to discuss when they saw this scene. Clearly, they were filled with resentment towards Yi Xian's violent actions, but they didn't dare to vent their anger openly. "Ling, your brother is a bastard," Yun Mengyao said with shame and indignation. She glared at Yi Xian fiercely. She had never thought that this man would be so rude. "Ling, let's go home." Unfortunately, Yi Xian ignored Yun Mengyao's fierce glare. He didn't want to have anything to do with this woman, so naturally, he wouldn't care about her feelings. Tap, tap, tap. Suddenly, a large number of footsteps could be heard. Before the person arrived, the noise could already be heard. "Constable Liu, he's the one who caused trouble in the school. Not only did he injure our teacher, but he also chopped off 3 of Director Sun's fingers." At the staircase, Lu Jundai was leading several constables to Yi Xian's location. There were even a few school leaders accompanying her. "Nonsense, this is too much. How could you do such a bloody and cruel thing?" As Lu Jundai and the others arrived in front of the office, before Lu Jundai could say anything, Principal Zhang Derui saw the scene in the office and his expression instantly changed. He directly looked at Yi Xian and angrily reprimanded him. "Constable Liu, please arrest him and bring justice to our Sky Blue Academy," Principal Zhang Derui said with hatred. Constable Liu. You have to do something for me." Sun Wanxiang's face was pale as he walked up to Lu Jundai. The blood on his hand was even more glaring. Just when everyone thought that Lu Jundai was going to bring Yi Xian to justice in the next moment, the following scene caused them to be completely dumbfounded. Kacha! A pair of shining handcuffs appeared in Lu Jundi's hand. However, the person she took wasn't Yi Xian, but Sun Wanxiang. When the handcuffs were cuffed, Sun Wanxiang froze on the spot. Sun Wanxiang, you are suspected of extortion. Please come with us to the Hanging Mirror Department for investigation. Take him away. Following Lu Jundi's order, a few constables took Sun Wanxiang down the stairs. I'm innocent. Constable Lu. Constable Lu, are you mistaken? Sun Wanxiang quickly regained his senses and cried out to Lu Jundai. Constable Lu, what is going on? Principal Zhang Derui was extremely shocked. Clearly, he didn't understand what was going on. Mr. Yi, I'm sorry to have frightened you. We will give you a satisfactory explanation for this matter, Lu Jundai said calmly. She didn't say anything more to Yi Xian and turned to leave with Sun Wanxiang. Lu Jundai came quickly and left quickly. However, the way she handled this matter was shocking. Many of the teachers present felt as if they were in a dream. In fact, no one present knew that when Yi Xian returned from the capital directly issued a secret order to the Jiangnan prefectures. Any matter related to Yi Xian was to be reported directly to the Wu and Bureau. No one else was to interfere or else they would be severely punished. When Lu Jundai received this secret order from the Jiangnan prefectures, she was also very confused. However, she had to obey the order given by her superiors. That was why the scene just now happened. Ring ring ring. A phone rang from Principal Zhang Derui's pocket. This also brought him back to reality. He quickly took out his phone. When he saw the phone number on the screen, he was even more shocked. He quickly picked up the phone. Hello, Elder Zhua. Okay, I understand. Yes. This is our school's mistake. Don't worry, Elder Zhua. I will deal with this matter seriously. Zhang Derui was drenched in cold sweat. His lips were slightly pale. When he handed the phone to Yi Xian, the anger from before had completely disappeared. It had completely turned into a flattering smile. Hello, is this Mr. Yi? An old voice came from the other end of the phone. You are. Yi Xian confirmed that he didn't know the person on the other end of the phone. This also made him question. Mr. Yi, Zhua Junting is this old man's granddaughter. I originally wanted to personally thank you for saving my life. However, when I heard that you were not in Jiangnan, I didn't have the chance to meet you. Elder Zhua's voice was sincere. When Zhua Junting was mentioned, Yi Xian already knew the other party's identity. It was obvious that the Zhua family valued Yi Xian very much. They also found out about Yi Ling's matter immediately, which was why they called. Yi Xian held the phone and chatted for a while. Meanwhile, Zhang Derui, who was bowing at the side, had a smile on his face. When Yi Xian hung up the phone, he said with a flattering smile, Don't worry, Mr. Yi. This kind of unfair thing happened in the school. We will definitely deal with it seriously. After saying this, Zhang Derui's face instantly turned cold. He looked directly at Li Hongyan and said angrily, Ms. Li, originally, a fight between two students was just a small matter. However, your actions were biased and completely lost the morals of a teacher. From today onwards, you are no longer a teacher of our Sky Blue Academy. You are fired. Chapter 48. The sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly. Although the air was still a little chilly, the streets were bustling with activity. All the shopping malls were packed with people. Everyone was buying New Year goods and preparing to spend the New Year. New Year. It was the most important festival in the Xia. Not only was Jiangnan City bustling with activity, but the entire Xia was the same. At this moment, Yi Xian was returning home with his little sister. However, the image of Yun Mengyao gnashing her teeth when they left the Sky Blue Academy appeared in his mind. This woman is really naive. Yi Xian smiled and erased Yun Mengyao's figure from his mind. Brother, isn't our teacher Yun beautiful? Yi Ling smiled slyly. Yes, this woman is gentle and decent, kind-hearted, and her appearance is indeed peerless. Yi Xian casually replied. He. Hearing Yi Xian's reply, Yi Ling sneered, "Brother, you were too rough today. You completely offended Teacher Yun. I'm afraid that if you want her to be your girlfriend, you won't have a chance." Yi Xian was stunned and scolded with a smile, "What are you thinking, little girl? It's impossible between us. Brother, let me tell you something serious. Teacher Yun is really not bad. If I were you, I would definitely try my best to get her. Moreover, I really want her to be my sister-in-law." Yi Ling was like a spirit, constantly egging Yi Xian on. Looking at his little sister's serious look, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He then shook his head helplessly. A hint of vicissitudes flashed across his eyes, but he hid it well. Yi Xian looked at the horizon and said in a low voice, "Little sister, what I'm pursuing is not love. Moreover, she and I are people from two different worlds. It's impossible. Brother, let me tell you. Mom has always wanted me to find a girlfriend for you. I think Teacher Yun is very good. Even if you want to be an old bachelor, would Mom agree?" Yi Ling pouted. "Alright, little girl. Don't bring this up again," Yi Xian scolded jokingly. I'll go back and tell Mom that you bullied me." Yi Ling stuck out her tongue and ran ahead. Looking at Yi Ling's cheerful figure, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with self-mockery. How could he forget that in the eyes of his mother and sister, his son was the older brother? Sooner or later, he would get married and have a family. This was a major life event, how could they not take it seriously? In the boundless secular world, there are 7 emotions and 6 desires. Living in the mortal world, do I really have to face the so-called love tribulation? Yi Xian muttered to himself and laughed at himself. The so-called love was nothing more than an illusion. The so-called beauty would only be a skeleton after 100 years. After 4 years of living in the blood sea, Yi Xian asked himself. He had long since given up on these things. He did not even know where his humble heart of pity had gone. Only he knew what he truly wanted. When Yi Xian had experienced the trials of life and death, no one understood the meaning of life better than him. If the heavens and earth were destroyed, he would not be destroyed. If all living things died, he would not die. His words were the law, and his actions were the law. He pursued the Tong Tian Dao until he looked down on the 9 heavens. That was what he truly wanted. Returning to his thoughts, Yi Xian strolled back home. At the same time, at the capital city airport. On the passenger plane from the capital city to Jiangnan City, Xia Qingzhu was wearing white sportswear. She was sitting in the first-class cabin in a daze. She looked at the white clouds outside the window with a perplexed look in her eyes. "Yi Xian, what have you experienced in the past 4 years?" Xia Qingzhu muttered to herself. Above the North Sea, a blood-red light illuminated the horizon. The misty blood-red light floated high in the sky. The endless waves of the North Sea surged. The sound of a huge tsunami was endless. Countless fish and shrimps in the water were slapped ashore. Buzz! The void vibrated and ripples spread. A wisp of blood-red light buzzed in the sky, as if it was calling someone. However, that strange movement completely caused the North Sea to be in turmoil. The endless seawater surged and the waves rolled towards the coast, drowning a small town on the coastline. It also caused the local residents to wail and flee in a sorry state. It was a huge tsunami. It was a terrifying disaster that directly attracted the attention of Xia Nation. Many rescue teams rushed towards the North Sea town and quickly evacuated the local people to prevent a greater disaster. Bian Pavilion. Night fell and stars dotted the night sky. When Mrs. Yi found out that Yi Xian had returned home, she deliberately went home early and cooked some exquisite and delicious dishes. The family was having dinner happily and chatting about some daily life. Eating the dishes cooked by Mrs. Yi, Yi Xian looked satisfied. Under Mrs. Ye's inquiry, Yi Xian did not mention that he had gone to the capital city. Of course, Yi Xian did not tell Mrs. Yi about the changes in Yiping. If Mrs. Yi knew the truth, she would probably suffer a huge blow. We are now broadcasting urgent news. We are now in Nanshan town. From here, we can clearly see that there is a huge tsunami in the North Sea. This is the first time such a huge natural disaster has happened in our country in 100 years. Suddenly, a voice came from the television, causing Yi Xian to look towards the screen. When he saw the scene on the television, he was stunned. Then, he abruptly stood up, and the aura around him fluctuated greatly. On the television, it was raining cats and dogs, and the host was swaying in the wind and rain. Her beautiful face was full of horror, and many people around her were pale. Clearly, they had been greatly frightened. The host was reporting the news while trembling slightly, and the scene in the distance was the scene of the North Sea churning violently. Attention all the citizens around the North Sea. Please hurry to the inland to gather. There is a rescue team there. Look, what's that? Suddenly, there was a scream coming from the television. The camera also began to shake, and the scene in the sky was directly shown on the screen. A blurry blood light floated in the clouds high in the sky. The deafening buzzing sound reverberated continuously, and the scene on the television came to an abrupt end. Such a shocking phenomenon was naturally seen by all the citizens of Xia Nation, and not just the people of Xia Nation. At this moment, satellites from all over the world detected this shocking scene, and it attracted the attention of all the countries. Ah, I hope this natural disaster will pass soon. Mrs. Yi sighed. Mother, I'm going out for a while. I might be back later. Without waiting for Mrs. Yi to respond, Yi Xian quickly walked out of the house and disappeared. This also made Mrs. Yi and Yi Ling stunned, not knowing what happened to Yi Xian. In the vast sky, light flashed. Yi Xian seemed to have turned into a shooting star, directly tearing through the endless clouds. With a terrifying flame behind him, he shot towards the North Sea at an unimaginable speed. Heaven-destroying halberd. How is this possible? How is this possible? Why would heaven-destroying halberd appear in the human world? What happened in the Blood Sea battlefield? Yi Xian's face was cold, and the aura around him fluctuated violently. He could not understand why heaven-destroying halberd would appear in the North Sea.